think February 18th, I got about the worst phone call you can get. I was on the phone with my mom. She was in the hospital. And the doctor came in and said, "I'm sorry, Carla, but you have cancer." A whole journey ensued from there. But that exact same week, I think 2 days later, you produced an album of an artist who had passed away from cancer. And you created a posthumous work with them. And that was Nightbirde. I saw a Rolling Stone article about it, and I instantly connected with it because of the cancer journey I was going through with my mom, because I had heard Nightbirde songs before and enjoyed it. But then to see somebody using AI to put out a work after somebody had passed, all of that kind of hit me at just the right week. But I'd love to talk about that album. That has to be such a complicated decision to put out work after she had already passed.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, sorry to hear about your mum. How is she doing now?
She passed.
Man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how tough that is, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think it speaks to, the legacy of Jane's music and her heart. And I don't know if you've seen the AGT stuff with the golden buzzer and just how she was and how that is really how she was with people. She was just this electric light of just good vibes and a big smile and just so much love and energy and warmth to give, and it's tragic that she passed, but also I think it's just so beautiful that her dream of just making people know that they are loved and that they matter and how she's spoken so much life to people even since passing, It's been a huge honor to be part of that with her family and some close friends of hers that have, worked very, very hard to sort of keep that dream alive. And, I want to give a huge shout out to Mitch Marczewski, Jane's dad, and the whole Nightbirde Foundation who, we worked together to create this music. And, our dear friend Amber who, manages a lot of that project to leverage that music to create income, which then funds treatment for young women with cancer.
Oh, how great.
So, I mean, what a legacy, so huge to be part of that. So I really wanted to acknowledge those guys as being so pivotal in how we sort of continued this work together, But we'd known each other, for quite some time beforehand, in working with Jane when she was still with us and making those pop songs and just kind of, we met through mutual friends at parties that we would be at together and just sort of ended up always talking about like Robin and Duran Duran and Aha and just 80s stuff and 80s inspired stuff that we both just really love the vibe of, those juicy synths and those really sort of processed, polished, sort of spacious vocals and just stuff that felt like, so evocative and nostalgic. And we loved that stuff and we would connect on our enjoyment of that. And one day she just sent me this song, which was It's Okay, and we just made a version of it, and she basically lost her mind and was like, we have to do more of this, So we'd sort of established this sort of working relationship out of friendship. And
was that version of It's Okay, and that's the synth pop version, right?
That's right, yeah.
Did that come out before she was on HET? Which, by the way, I guess for people is America's Got Talent.
Right on, yeah, of course.
If you're in another country, I guess that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, America's Got Talent. It actually came out, we had it sort of ready to go, and my recollection is that it came out while she was on the show, and I think it went to number 2 or number 3 on the iTunes chart just from the fact that people responded to her so strongly. And I think the Maple House Sessions version, which I didn't create that was a piano performance and vocal. I think that was number 1 on the iTunes store, I believe. I may have that wrong, but out of kind of nowhere, I remember her texting me and was like, I just can't even believe this, It was just really an incredible moment for her to just feel like, wow, so this is actually happening, But yeah, so the process of how the posthumous stuff happened, she had, in the course of working on music and writing songs, accumulated a collection of, she would set her phone up in, selfie mode on her piano and video herself working on ideas. And she had done a cover song that we did together where she had recorded the vocals and played it. And initially, I had just used an AI to pull out the vocal from the piano. So it wasn't using generative AI in that way. I was just like, I think it was Moises or one of those tools that can just...
Stem separation.
Yeah, it was just like, I need that vocal so that I can then start building a track around, get some ideas together and try and just kind of figure out, like, could this be a thing? you know?
Dateline is hitting the road for a first-of-its-kind event, and you're invited. Join the entire Dateline team in Nashville, Tennessee for Dateline Live. Hear from Lester, Blaine, Andrea, Josh, Keith, and Dennis, plus live demonstrations, a VIP reception, and more. The true crime original like you've never seen before. Buy tickets to Dateline Live now at datelinenbc.com/event. It would be a crime to miss it.
During that process, like, you know, you take the vocal out and it was just a phone recording. And look, sometimes an iPhone recording is exactly what you want. I use an iPhone all the time to cut a guitar part real quick and then just airdrop it to myself and use it as a demo. And then I'm like, nah, I'm not re-recording. It has a vibe or whatever. Like, you know, sometimes it's an amazing tool, right? So I'm not trying to diminish that. But it wasn't like a finished vocal. It wasn't to a click or anything like that. So I would extract the vocal and tweak it and edit it and melodyne it and just kind of try and make it feel a bit more finished. And that was a song, Get What You Give, right? So that we made that single, and that was like the first of those.
The New Radical song?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so she always loved that song, and we made like this synth pop version of that thing, and it was just fun to work on. And during that process, there was a tool, and it's not like now where you can just upload it and 45 seconds later you've got a whole song, you know, like on Suno or Kits or whatever. You know, it's like back then I was cobbling together my own system using a tool set. You had to open up a Google Colab notebook, which is like an online cloud-based notebook computer that you can use, which uses Google's cloud resources for the processing and everything. So it's like having a virtual computer in the cloud. And you would then deposit and cut and paste pieces of code from like GitHub repositories and things like that. So it's like, and I'm not a coder. I'm familiar with software architecture and things like that just from years of using computers, and I worked in visual effects where we would use scripts for doing various tasks, but I'm not a coder. I can't sit there and hack out C++ or whatever, but I know enough about it to be dangerous and annoying, and so I would cobble pieces of code from these GitHub repositories, and there was a tool called Sovit's SVC, which was the precursor to all this sort of AI vocal cloning, essentially, that we're now all super familiar with.
So I've used it myself.
Right.
I haven't made a model. I just used models other people made.
Right.
Which I'm really interested in. You obviously had to make a model.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm familiar with the process. But yeah, it's got to sound crazy to somebody who's never done this before. But it is one of those things where you can watch a little tutorial or you can read the instructions they have on, and you're like, all right, what? Click that, do that. But it is very manual. You remember like 80s and 90s movies? Somebody would be on computer enhance. It's the opposite of that. It is a very manual process.
Right. So I was cobbling, and there's revisions of these pieces of code. And so you're copying them and then referencing files that you've uploaded to a Google Drive so it can look at that. And I mean, it was fiddly for me. I was definitely like, what? As you say. It was not like, oh man, I get this instantly. It took me months to actually develop a model that I could get a result that I really was happy with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had
so much tweaking.
A lot of tweaking, and, you know, using the different iterations of code that people were working on kind of in real time, and I would see an update come, so I'd go and copy that piece of code and try that and see if it did a better job of handling the sibilances or the transients of the vocal, you know, and there was just these kind of developments were being made by people who were contributing to these open source, you know, shared code type of repositories, you know, which in itself is just a fascinating idea. You know, the most groundbreaking work in that sort of space was happening on the open source internet with people trying things, and it was this real-time sandbox you could experience, you know, it was cool. But I had all the vocals from the studio sessions available, so I would go back through all the sessions and print versions of all the vocals with, you know, no plugins, or maybe some plugins if I wanted it to be like, I want it to reference a studio quality vocal.
Right.
Right. And then I had, you know, reference stuff that had her singing high notes with full voice or high notes with falsetto, and it was all just bundled into the same model. And so by the end of the process, I'd made several models, and I would run her vocal through several different iterations, one where everything was full voice, and then one where it was just a falsetto model. And then I would comp between, because one thing Jane would do is she would flick between her sort of regular full voice and her falsetto voice, depending on how she wanted to approach singing a phrase. So I wanted that ability to have it interpret her performance correctly, because I wasn't fabricating performances of Jane's. It wasn't like I was singing it and then turning it into Jane's voice. It was, these vocals had been performed by her for all of those songs, and they were assembled, even new songs that hadn't even really been finished, but like there was a verse there and a chorus and pre, and, you know, between the versions, you could see what the song was. And so I would take those performances, edit them together in Melodyne from the extract. So I would use an AI to extract from those demos off the phone videos, right? That was step one. Take the videos, assemble sort of a version of the song, extract the vocals, comp it together into a kind of it fits with a click. It's hard to make a synth pop track without a click. Yeah. If you want to sequence a bass line, it kind of has to be on the grid to some degree, right? So taking that process to comp and edit a vocal, which sonically did not sound good, you know, but it was the performance, and it was just Jane being Jane, singing this thing, and she'd laugh in the videos and distract herself, so you'd have to go through and chop that stuff out because she was just having so much fun doing this stuff, writing these songs, and she would try a phrase 4 times, and you'd be like, I think that was the one that captured the intent. So having worked with her as a producer, and we had that relationship where I'd be like, hey, I love how you sing. Look at me pressing the fake talk back button. Hey, I love how you did that. Let's sing that again like that. You know, let's get a couple of those, whatever. So in that process of working together, I feel like I have pretty good understanding of what she would go for a certain vibe in a song, you know, and we'd done that, you know, many times. So I would take those pieces and comp a vocal, and then I would run it through these various AI versions, and some of the notes would be her belting it and some of it would be falsetto, but I'm going to produce that vocal like hey, I love it when you hit it in this chorus as falsetto, but in this chorus at the back of the song, let's use full voice. So it sounds. So
did you have a different model for falsetto, Jane?
Exactly.
And,
yeah.
Like, it's a very manual process.
Yeah.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You're definitely not like throwing the voice memo and AI, make a Jane song.
No.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't generative.
This was
in
a
the
labor
sense,
of love.
Yeah, it wasn't generative in the sense of here's some lyrics, make it sound like that vocal. It was definitely like, this is the performance, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, you know, it gets into that idea of ethical AI, right? Which is what some of those articles that you were talking about were sort of referencing. The idea that, I mean, you know, and this conversation has expanded massively even since I did that work, you know what I mean? Because even using Sovert's SVC kind of by hand and everything, people were doing that and throwing on vocals, and there were repositories of people who had done the same thing, extracted vocals of Metallica or Janet Jackson or whoever, and you could run all kinds of models through it. You could turn it into Waylon Jennings if you wanted to, like whatever.
I ran one of my own songs through a John Lennon and a Paul McCartney voice.
Yeah.
I actually did Paul McCartney for one, and then I did John Lennon for all the harmonies. And it's interesting because there's moments where you're like, holy shit, it's John Lennon. But to your point about the performance, one thing I noticed, I won't remember any of the words, but my R sounds, I say R like an American, you know, American, and they're like, American, you know, like they drop the R or they don't do the R's at the end of certain phrases.
Right.
And so I would listen to it, I'm like, that sounds like the Beatles. And then you'd get to an R phrase and I'm like, no, that's not them. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not how they would say it.
Right.
And so to really do it, you know, and make it convincingly sound like Paul McCartney, you would have to have somebody who's already a Paul McCartney impersonator and can hit his performance. Mm-hmm. And then that AI is just going to take it one step further into getting the proper timbre. Mm-hmm. But with you were actually using her performances, and it sounds like you were essentially doing is getting it to sound like it had been actually recorded in a studio.
That's right.
So you didn't have brilliant pop production and then all of a sudden an iPhone vocal.
Yeah, essentially it was a tone manipulation technique. You know what I mean? That's essentially what the goal was, to be able to have a vocal that felt like we had worked on it in a studio to a click, like as if she'd sung it to the track that it ended up being alongside, you know. Right. So the family were like overwhelmingly supportive of this idea as we started making progress and the songs would take shape, and, you know, it became quicker and quicker to do because I'd established this workflow and all that sort of thing. But it was a massive labor of love in the sense, even for me, like, you know, it would have been absolutely unsustainable if I'd been billing a proper rate for the time that went into it, you know, and it was just really cool for me to be a part of it and learn those skills and techniques and approaches, and, you know, and then fast forward to now where that work is not wasted because we did it when we did it, but at the same time now I could do that in like 45 seconds. Wow. You know, like if, you know, using like Suno or one of those apps, it's so fast just to drag a vocal in and then apply your model or kits. You know, there's a bunch of these tools. This is not some trade secret. Like that stuff's out there. It's very easy to use. You have to read the fine print because if you put up a model that is, and you use their thing, then maybe they own or can use that model. Other people could use that model. I don't know. You'd have to be very careful about that. I was very cautious because I didn't want that to be the case. You know? But
I want to come back to all the ethics, but I've realized we've gone pretty far without, if you don't know the Nightbirde story, from what I saw, she was on America's Got Talent. Mm-hmm. She comes out. She already is undergoing chemotherapy because she's lost her hair. Mm. And she comes on stage and she's just like this really sweet kind of angelic presence. I mean, I think a lot of people have said that about her.
Yeah.
And she gets up and she does her song, It's Okay. There's just something so like moving and innocent about the performance. And it's just a beautiful song. I was sitting in my car watching YouTube. I was kind of getting ready to get married that year. I was engaged. And I don't know what your experience was like, but in my year of engagement, I went into it very confident, and towards the middle, I had a big slump, and then it got better by the end, and we're married now. But facing all the kind of insecurities and unsureness of life, and then this song's like, it's okay to be lost. We're all a little lost, and it's all right. I felt so much emotional impact. And then America's Got Talent has got to be the best show in the world at making you feel emotions. Because all of a sudden they're like, pow, golden buzzer, fucking gold falls from the sky. People fall to their knees and like, what? And they show the crowd and everybody. It's like the most triumphant moment there's ever been. And then Simon Cowell, and I wonder if you've have this perspective or not, because you're from New Zealand. When I was growing up in America, he was on America's Got Talent, and he was the asshole character.
100%.
So I grew up with Simon Cowell as an asshole. He's just like, that wasn't good. Not anymore. America's Got Talent, Simon Cowell is like the sweetest man.
He is, yeah.
And he was such a supporter of her. He asked her story. It was such a beautiful moment. And so I watched that, and I was like, I was really moved. And so then I had to watch more stuff. And then I saw, and maybe you'll know how to pronounce their name, but the choir. Mm-hmm. What do they call it?
Mzansi Youth Choir.
Mzansi Youth Choir.
Yeah, from South Africa.
So I follow her journey and see, oh no, she's gotten sicker. And I knew from the beginning, just from seeing my friends' stories, I knew from the beginning this girl had passed away. And then I see that the youth choir cover of her song, and holy shit. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm a big sucker for harmony already.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they were a youth choir, the fact that they were all wearing white, and they've got these dance moves that go with everything. Yeah. There's just such a fucking profound purity of that performance. And I'm getting chills just talking about it because it just, all of their counter harmonies and things they were doing, like I was in the car just like, I just started weeping and just weeping and weeping. And I'm like, what is this? Like I hadn't cried that hard in a decade. Mm. And all of a sudden I'm just crying in my car like, it's okay, and then they fucking jump an octave and all this stuff. And I'm like, just so moved.
Yeah.
So I have this like 45-minute cry session in my car where I'm like, what is all these things coming out of me right now, these emotions? And then I find your synth pop version, and it's a whole nother experience for this song where it's really upbeat, really fun. And now I'm driving my car, I'm leaving, right? And it's a perfect like driving fast down the road song. I start driving fast down the road like I'm gonna conquer shit, and just like, and that I just had this like week or two where I couldn't play that song without having an emotional reaction. That's my personal story of the It's Okay song.
I mean, I would love to
add?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I have such a huge admiration for Simon Cowell. I've never met Simon, but he was very communicative and sort of connected with Jane, even after the show, and, would check in with her and had become a real supporter. He wrote the foreword in the book that Jane published, that the family published. He wrote the foreword for that. Like, he was involved and connected and, interested and supportive and a real friend, and I just think as you say, that version of Simon Cowell is very different than the guy we sort of all, when he first came out and he just hated everything. And
I think that was TV.
I think so too.
I think they wanted, like, you're going to be this character. And it was an old version of TV where everybody had a lot more control. There's a lot more gatekeepers.
Right. And it's also like he's looking for something objectively incredible.
Yeah.
And he's on that mission. And so he's like, next, that's not it, next. And I think that people as a TV audience responded to how like, oh, that was brutal. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's fun TV. I feel terrible for some of the people who are on the wrong end of that. But he had a very incisive way of saying, that's not what I'm looking for, you know?
Right.
You have to respect that level of kind of clarity that you're offering someone. You're not at Get Out, you're rubbish, you know, whatever. It's hard to watch, but I think the amount of encouragement and enthusiasm he shows on America's Got Talent, particularly towards Jane and then the youth choir subsequent, like I have to say, Sudumo, who's, the choir director. So me and Amber, who works with the Nightbirde Foundation and is a real sort of architect of a lot of the ideas and the initiatives that organization is doing. And that's a small team. That's Mitch Senior, Mitch Junior, and Amber largely. And I hope I'm not leaving out too many other people that are peripheral, but those three really drive that. And so we'd had this idea for the song Still Got Dreams, which was going to be the title track of the album. And we were like, wouldn't it be cool if we could get the youth choir to sing on that one too? And I had this sort of vision for what it could be. So Amber and I jumped on a Zoom call with Sudumo, who's the choir director out in South Africa. And we were chatting with him about the song and the direction, and he was so excited. He was, we would love to do it, it'd be so cool. And he, hey, I got a surprise for you guys. And he brings in the choir. They start singing. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. It was so good. This is like chills. It's like
there's something about them and Jane both, and I'm only speaking as somebody who just saw it on YouTube, so I've not been close to it, but something about both of those groups that just the visual and the music together pulls on your heart. I don't know what it is.
I think you said it. You said there's this real purity about it. There's this real just angelic gentleness to these people that is just so humble and beautiful, and they're so talented, like ridiculously talented. Like if I was that talented, I'd be unbearable, I'm sure. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, look at me, man, I'm awesome. You should pay me a lot of money and get out of my way when I'm trying to find a car park. Like I would be probably not my best self, but they just embody such beautiful, gracious humility and care and love, and I mean that. They're just such a good vibe, and so we had that experience, and then we, collaborated remotely on the track, and Sudumo orchestrated all the arrangements, and they did the recording, and the stuff arrives on Dropbox, and I'm just like working on this album, there were and I was alone for basically the whole process. I'm working in my studio, just working on this for months on end, and there was just many times where I'd just be sitting there just weeping, I mean, just Jane's such a special person. We were great friends. To lose a friend is just a brutal thing, and cancer is just a brutal, brutal thing, as you've experienced, and so to be hearing that music, and she, it just kind of felt like she was in it, and it was her, and it wasn't some fabrication, and it wasn't digital trickery kind of. It wasn't a scam. It wasn't a grift. It was her. She performed that, and it was her studio sound. And we just used some really incredible tech to marry those two things together. But just talking about the impact of that choir and the emotion of it all, it was just such a special thing. I mean, honestly, it was just beautiful. And to feel like AI was a part of that story, like that's really special to me. And I know, the ethics of AI, these are big topics that everyone's wrestling with right now. Like, what does that mean for my job when I make music for film and TV and da-da-da-da?
And I want to go into that bigger ethical discussion, but zooming out, I mean, I think what you did was really beautiful, and I think it's like, this is a good early example of how AI should be used. I think this is an easy one to look at and not feel too morally ambiguous about. And what I wanted to say is, I've had the experience of going, I have this record in progress, not only do I really care about it, but they really care about it. And I've thought, what if I crash my car on this road trip? What if I died today, in a terrible accident, and that was never finished? And I've always thought, I hope somebody can get into my hard drive. Like, I hope they will take the time to get into my hard drive, take this project and finish it. Like, that's always kind of this thought in the back of my head in the middle of a big project. I'm like, what if after I've passed, they're like, oh, that feels wrong, to try to worry about our project when Ryan's passed away. But me beyond the grave would be like, finish the project. This was my work. My heart and soul is in that. Finish it. And so, not to put words into Nightbirde's mouth, into Jane's mouth, but I think as an artist, at least from where I stand, I very much am like, what an honor that somebody would take the time to finish the stuff we've worked on. You would want those things to see the light of day. How did it come about in the beginning that you guys, like, did you have the idea and you showed the family, like, hey, guys, there's been some advances in technology. Like, I don't know if you know we can do this. Or did somebody approach you? Or how did this idea come to be?
I think it was out of that, hey, I've been messing around with this. And I think it was a conversation between me and Amber initially, like, do you think the family would want to explore this idea? And it was kind of like, yeah, at least I think that's how it went down. It's been a minute since we did that. So, but I think that was the conversation, right?
Do you remember did it feel weird at all? Like, ooh, I hope nobody thinks this is
Well, I think we were all, I didn't think it was overstepping at the beginning. I mean, I was definitely like, I think this can really do something special. It was really my motivation and my sort of experience of hearing it back, I think this could be really special. And I know Amber felt the same way, and I know that the family feels that way. Like, wow, this is really kind of special, I remember when stuff came out and people would post on like, oh, I can't believe the family would try and steal her memory and, da-da-da-da-da. And I literally got on there as the producer of the project and said, hey, thanks for commenting. I hope you know that, the money that gets generated from Jane's music is actually used to support other people with cancer, funds treatment for people with cancer. And, we made this to honor her legacy. And, she didn't write these songs for them to just get buried on a phone somewhere and never be heard. No. And there's magic in these songs. They're really beautiful songs. They're uplifting and they're inspiring and encouraging. And, I was so ready to defend that because I didn't want anyone to misconstrue it and think, oh, it's just a grab. Like, what are these people doing? It's like, no, this is art that she made. And I think we're now at a time in technology where we can do something that we've never been able to do before for someone who has passed, for the fans of someone who has passed, and for the music, and for the family. Like, it's been incredible, truthfully. Like, yeah, so there was a few comments, but I think largely no one was skeptical once they kind of got a vision. And I vaguely remember even that person was like, oh, I had no idea, you know what I mean? Like, and everyone was defending it. Like, so yeah, it sort of started around a conversation of this could be really meaningful. And based on the response to that album, I think it has been really meaningful. I think people are encouraged by it. I think the music itself continues to lift people up from the feedback that we get, and people can look at that technology being utilized and not be like, oh no, this is so cynical and music's over, and which are very natural responses to things like that. Like when drum machines came out, everyone was like, all the drummers are going to be out of work, and this isn't that. This has much bigger implications than a drum machine. But until people understood the limitations and implications of drum machines, they also thought there was never going to be a paid drummer again. I mean, clearly not the case, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it does raise a lot of concerns and questions.
Is there anything else we should talk about or you'd like to talk about it before we kind of move into something wider?
I mean, I think it was just, for me, so fulfilling to really invest some time into trying to do the best job I could with kind of an emerging technology. And it kind of made me feel awesome to have figured out some of these moving pieces. And as I say, that work, I mean, it's not redundant now, but you don't have to do that now. That's done. You can hit some buttons and it's all bundled in. Some version of that technology is all bundled into these apps, and it makes it very painless for people to do that. So in a way, I'm grateful that it was available in some form to do it before it was as easily doable as it is now. It feels good to know that I had to get into the soil and get dirt in my nails to do that and wrestle it into place for her. It feels like we earned the right to have those songs finished in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm grateful that it took effort and work and stress and it wasn't working, and navigating that process, I think, just from the sense of satisfaction. And I know that it would be very easy to look at a project like that without that context and be, oh, that's no big deal. I can make my voice sound like Mariah Carey, whatever. And then to be able to say, well, actually, when we did that, it wasn't that, not like, oh, I'm some pioneer. That's not what I'm saying. But I am.
But you didn't just press 3 buttons and then it spit out.
No, and
you didn't go to Suno and go make a Nightbirde song and then it spit it out and you're like, hey, everyone, this is a Nightbirde song.
Yeah. And I think there's a sense of satisfaction around that and a sense of duty to Jane and just sort of sense of, I did that work for you, my friend, and I wanted your fans and I wanted your family to have this, and I wanted to figure that out for you. It was a labor of love. There was effort. It wasn't like, oh, that was easy, here you go. You know what I mean? And there's a certain satisfaction that I feel around that, and then to be invited into further conversation around that process, even though the specifics of that process are very nerdy and irrelevant now, given the point and shoot technology that we have, which is great. I mean, it will help that kind of thing happen for a lot more people and a lot more artists. And I'm sure labels will be exploring this for legacy content to be able to be like, unfinished demos can now be realized. And, I think there'll be some really exciting things in that space of kind of, honorarium and legacy, for artists that have passed, and not in the generative sense, like we're going to feed all of Janis Joplin's vocals and make new stuff. Like, it's not that. I don't know that honors their legacy necessarily, generative just based on someone else saying something or, that's not what I'm kind of excited about. But it's really like, I mean, is there some unfinished stuff that got trashed and can be salvaged and rescued, or the recording was bad or the tape is bad, but we can salvage it somehow, It's the restorative piece that's interesting to me because, those
that
vocals
was the
were
Beatles
not
now and then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's an interesting that part of it is interesting to me,
It's such a fine line. I use AI a lot in just kind of day-to-day life stuff. And one thing I found this really interesting for me is almost like focus testing ideas. Mm-hmm. So I'll go on, and I just discovered this on accident one night, and I'll do the voice mode always, like, because I want to just talk naturally to it, and it's so good at actually transcribing what I said, and it mostly gets it right. Sometimes there's weird hallucinations and it'll say shit I didn't say, but mostly it's good. But I'll go in there and I'll have an idea. So for this podcast, when we're recording this, I haven't settled on a final name yet, but I focus tested, quote unquote, the name. So I'm like, hey, generate 30 hypothetical professionals who would be an audience member of Diary of a CEO podcast. Create 30 people avatars, like their name, where they're from, the business that they're in, what they're into, stuff like that. All right, now run these 10 names by them, and I want each person to rank order what they liked. And then it'll spit out, and it's like, Steven from Santa Cruz, who's a software developer and he's 31, he really liked this name best. And then here's his little quotation on why. And then it's like, Sandra from New York thought this. And it's like, none of those people are real, but it did kind of think through and hypothetical. It was a little actor, and it acted. And it's not as good as really talking to a person, but it was better than me just going, what do I like? It allowed me to think outside of my own box for a second. Yep. And it allowed me to think through a process. So what's interesting for me is, okay, I'm not a focus tester. That's not my career. I don't have passion and care about what it's like to try to interview all these people and I'm sure there's somebody who is passionate about focus testing names. And for that person, the idea of just using AI to try to come up with a brand name is insulting, or could be insulting on some level, that I'm reducing their career to just like, oh, AI can do it. I don't need to hire you. Like, AI will do it just as good, because they know the nuts and bolts and ins and outs of what they do. And there's a pride in it, and there's, artistry on some level, I'm sure. When it's not my domain, I'm like, sure, AI do this, whatever, cool. When it is my domain that I know, when it comes into music, that's when I get a little more picky and like, whoa. And I could imagine if you're not a musician and you're just, you had a little song idea in your head, but you're so far from ever being able to do music professionally, you would never put your little doodle into a song. To have a tool like Suno where you could put your little doodle in and then spit something out is that's probably really cool. And you're not feeling any ethical concern about that, because you're like, dude, I came up with this little song idea and I was never going to make it into anything. But for somebody like myself who makes their living by making those, you get into the weeds about a sound. When it comes into your domain, you're like, I know I'm concerned about AI. I really wanted to have you on because I felt like it was such a great example of, I'm like, I don't know what's right or wrong in AI, but that's fucking right. Mm-hmm. That's fucking right. Mm. But there's a lot of gray areas in what you just said with Janis Joplin. We're just going to throw all our songs in and makes new Janis Joplin songs. I'm like, I think that's fucking wrong. Mm-hmm. what's in the middle? Like we're all navigating this together. Have you come to any conclusions or rules for yourself?
I mean, no, but also it just continues to be an evolving space, right? So I think the whole industry is continuing to evaluate and kind of compartmentalize and try and assess, like, what pieces of this are helpful, what pieces of this do we want to shepherd ourselves from? Like, I mean, but to your point that you were talking about before, you know, a piano is not just a piano when you're in that world, and to someone who's exterior to that world, like, it's got piano on it, you know. I think all of music, all of art, all of creativity, all of expertise really comes down to magnification levels. And let me explain. Like, if you look at a dot on a page, it's like 4 millimeters across, you know, 3/16 of an inch across, right? When you draw a little quaver on a page. And so you can say that's the note, that's where it happens, pitch and time, bang, it's on this grid. But when you zoom into that, when you magnify that blob on the page, and now it's an oval on a slight angle about this big, and you can see that the pitch could be anywhere within that oval and still be relevant. And I think great vocalists are so aware of this, the way they can pull a note a little under. And this is where auto-tune can really mess up a song, when the vocalist is that on it, that you hit that note a little under for the effect that it gives you, you know. And, you know, I'm from New Zealand, and when you hear a Māori choir, which is the Indigenous people of New Zealand, sing, you know, the person in the lowest note is holding a note. The person an octave up, probably a little flat. The person above that, even a little flatter. So you get this real warm, and it's very intuitive. No one's sitting there going, I'm going to sing my part 16 cents flat from the guy that's in fifth below me. Like, no one's doing the math. But the instinctive note relationship is that as the notes get higher, they seem to just get flatter and flatter and flatter and flatter. And it makes this really warm, beautiful, warm sound. Like when you hear a Māori vocal group sing that way, and I've sort of thought about it for years, and I think what's happening is that just the instinct is to just be a little under. It feels warm and kind of, I don't know, there's just something special and magical that if you auto-tuned all those people or put them into Melodyne, oh yeah, you'd lose the absolute heart of it, you know? And then there's other vocals like where the layers are sort of brighter and it really shines and sounds so, you know, in a different way, just vibrant and beautiful. And it's because they're magnifying their view of that note. So instead of this oval on a page that's only this big and it's just, that's the value, as an integer, you know, as a round number. And then you zoom in here and there's 20 decimal places, you know what I'm saying? So I think all those things like pocket and feel, and when the snare drum's back, instead of that quaver being on the grid, it's like you zoom right in and the bar line's here instead of, like, whatever, you know, those details, and like the nuance of the kind of piano, a tack piano, a felt piano, the mics are further back off the piano. I mean, and I know this is also nerdy and annoying, but those details are what makes it feel how it feels. So if you just pull up piano sample number 1 and make every song with that, it's not gonna feel how it feels when you actually have an upright piano mic'd in a certain way, or a grand piano mic'd in a certain way, or an M1 house piano doing that classic house chord sort of thing where the velocity has no variation, and even that has a feeling to it. Like, people say that sounds so synthetic and crap. It's like, well, it sounds synthetic, but when you're playing 90s house music, that's exactly the sound you want. You know what I mean? So there's all these nuances in both directions, in all directions, that to me feel like expertise is just, for me, it's magnification of the ideas to the point where you understand the subtlety and the nuance, and then can sort of create those intended emotional effects on demand, right? Like, what matters is how it feels when it comes out the speaker. It doesn't matter that in your mind you're figuratively magnifying that quaver so that you can play around with the pitch. That's irrelevant. It becomes an instinctive part of the process to say, I want this to sit this way because I know how that's going to feel. It's all got to be driven by what's the emotional response. When people hear that song and they go, oh man, and they weep in their car, it's because all those things came together in a way that elicits that emotional response from you. And some of those things are magical, happy accidents. And some of those things are, oh yeah, I totally meant to do that because I know what happens when I use that juicy DW8000 pad with the delay on it and play an F major 9 with no third on the 4 chord, you know, and it just feels so uplifting and incredible. Even though it's a completely synthetic sound, there's so much emotion in the right synthetic sound doing the right thing, right? So you can talk about pianos as this subtle, nuanced, organic instrument. You can talk about a DW8000, which to me is the best kept, which I'm just ruining it for myself because now everyone's going to go buy one for $400, and it's literally the best synth on the planet, in my opinion. Korg DW8000, incredible sounding synth. Anyway, it's the nuance, right? So as we segue into the AI thing, it's like we as music makers have this intent. We have inspiration. We have an emotional outcome in mind. We're coming at this creative process from such a different space than an AI, that's creating this music based on a prompt with no motivation, with no emotional intent. What it's doing is aggregating everything it ever heard and saying, well, that song just sounded like that. I want an Americana song. So it goes, bling, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds awesome. There's no intent. But like somewhere in the middle of that, like you say, there's this ethical use where we're using it to create legacy for people who have passed, who had really something special to offer the world. And then we have this sort of cynical, greedy use of saying we're going to regurgitate all these people and sell stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then in between, it's like, how do we as creators find value in these tools, which are incredible? Like, I mean, you've used it. You throw a thing into Suno and it makes something kind of awesome sometimes, and sometimes it's garbage. And then it's on us to be like, that's good and that's bad. Just like when someone's playing an idea in the studio and we go, we like that riff's not so good, try something else. Is at some level using these generative AI processes similar to using Splice. You can get a cool guitar lick out of there that you wouldn't have come up with necessarily, but it is cool. Is that any different than curating content from Splice? I didn't play that drum loop, but it's cool and I'm going to use it. And I mean, let's face it, Splice loops make up a huge component of pop music production, and people are using that. But and some purists are like, well, that's not your work, you just use that thing. But that's like, hip-hop was that back when it started, sampling records and making, DJing records and having people rap on them. But we don't look at that in a pejorative sense and say, oh, that's just stealing and plagiarism. And some people do, and some people don't. You know what I mean? So I think there's always been this ethical push and pull about plagiarism, originality, sort of utilizing other people's work, and some of them are contentious, like the Blurred Lines thing. That's like, well, you stole this from Marvin Gaye or whatever. And then other things are like, I was really inspired by Jimi Hendrix, so yeah, I used that chord voicing. But all art is inspiration and plagiarism. We're all using the same 12 colors on a palette and painting things that are inspired by our experiences. And some of those things I did like Aha records, so I will use some of those kinds of sounds to create the feelings that those records gave me. Like, am I a thieving vandal for doing that? I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's, it's inspiration. It's taking a collective human experience, like folk music. For 2,000 years, most Western folk music used the same chords probably, or at least a very similar subset when they're using those very simple instruments and being like, my bonny lass ran away across the field and I'm sailing my ship. And it was just very simple ideas, and everyone would sing along, and familiarity and genre and idiom were really important to that, and what does it mean to have a genre if I can't make something that sounds like a Marvin Gaye record without being sued? Like, I mean, that's a genre of music, and do I want it to sound exactly like that song? No, but it's going to have an organ and a cowbell and a drum set and a kind of bass line and a skanky guitar and a soulful melody. It's like, at what point is it fair to accept that music has evolved out of collective community behaviors and has evolved into genres? Like, are you just ripping off Bon Iver because you're using folk guitars and a vocoder? Like, I don't know. At what point, I mean, maybe you were inspired by him and you take it in your own direction, but not every song made with a vocoder and kind of nothing else means that they're plagiarizing Imogen Heap, right? So there's these conversations that are like, what part is it inspiration and imitation and then just straight up stealing, And some of those things are more cut and dry than others. And then so as you start to throw AI in that mix, you're like, well, that's kind of an accumulation of all music has been fed into these things, and that's a problem, right? We've got these companies that are going to make a lot of money generating music generatively with AI, and all they know how to do is just make stuff that's an amalgamation of people's art. So, one of the big conversations is, and I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time to get to this point, but one of the big points is compensation. We could look at the idea that we know AI is here. We know that people are going to be making money from it. And we know that the AI can only do what it did because people, without authorization, fed every song that we ever made into the AI. So people
without authorization.
People rightfully hate that idea. I hate that idea. I hate the idea that
we should have all been paid.
Someone should have had a conversation. Like, and all the authors, like you think about music's one thing, but you think about all the written language, which was obviously the first thing about these language models is, can we predict what the next word will be in a sentence using an analysis of language? That was really what started this whole thing, right? So all those novels that people plugged in to all that stuff, which I'm sure at this point is every novel. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then music, like we are going to absorb every...
How the fuck did they get away with it? Because artists will come into your studio and they'll be afraid. They're like, da-da-da-da, and they're like, oh, wait, does that sound like that Fall Out Boy song? And you'll sit there and you'll be like, hold on. Okay, it is the same. How many notes is it the same? It's only 4 notes the same. That's okay. They can only, it's like 7 notes or something
right.
is where it's, and you'll be really careful as an artist. And then fucking OpenAI just goes, we'll put everything from everywhere and train our thing. And then everybody figured it out and they're like, it's already trained. It's fine. And they're just...
Well, no, I don't think anyone is saying it's already trained. It's fine. I think that, there are very current conversations happening that are like, we need to figure out how to compensate people and artists and songwriters. And then as you talk...
Even though they've already done it.
They've already done it. It's still wrong. It's like, yeah, you already stole that from the bank, but we know you did, so you're still going to go to jail for it. It's like it's a cold case. Let's just call it a cold case. You stole the world's music, and you're trying to make millions of billions of dollars, which they will,
Trillions.
And people utilizing that music, right, who are not related to the crime of stealing it, if it is in fact a crime, and I don't want to accuse anyone publicly that they've done that because I'm not looking for a defamation suit, but essentially, it's a nuanced conversation. But yeah, it appears that there's a lot of stuff that's gone into these algorithms that people have not been compensated for. Like no one's kind of licensed the music. Like any commercial use requires a license, right? Someone can't take my song and plop it on a TV show without paying for it and without having permission to do that. And so since it's not public facing in the first instance, it's not an immediately public-facing result, right? No one's saying, oh, that song, and then blimp, that's that song. And it's not my song, but could it be called a derivative work? Probably. I mean, it's a derivative work of every song ever made, and maybe some artists, like, I always think of Skrillex, right? Love Skrillex. What a freaking genius. But I feel like it's really unlikely that without specific prompting, something would make the next Skrillex record accidentally, because he exists in his own paradigm where he is making shit that is bonkers, and it's so rad and inventive and just wild. Like, I can't imagine someone having a prompt that could predict a Skrillex record. So he's probably the only guy. Fred again, maybe too. Like, these guys are just so wildly inventive and cool. I love it. And everyone listening would be like, I have 100 people I could suggest from that perspective too. Awesome. But there's a lot of stuff that is kind of more like, there's disco pop that you're like, okay, well, we kind of know what disco pop is. We can go back to the Nile Rodgers stuff from the 70s, 80s, whatever, and be like, if we just trained it on that, we would get disco pop. If we said, take that and make it modern, then we get modern disco pop. Like, and if you fed it Dua Lipa, you would then further extrapolate that and you'd be able to, I made the next record of whoever before they did. You know what I mean? So those people have to be compensated, somehow, surely, don't they? And these are the questions, right? And there are people advocating for compensation for, the material and the artist and the rights holders whose work has been plugged into these, learning models, and people are going to make a lot of money from it,
This side theory. This is my half funny, half kind of real opinion, not yours. So for the lawyers, but I kind of think that there's a movie where Sam Altman is the villain who is trying to conquer the world. Like that fuck. I've seen him on a few podcasts. He comes off so nice and maybe he is actually nice and you meet him, you're like, shit, he's just a nice guy. But I kind of think he's evil. He has the right vibe of he would be good in a movie because when he talks, he's like, yeah, Joe, I think we're going to need UBI for people because, man, I just didn't know this is coming for people's jobs and wow, everything's going to change and like people are going to need help. But I really think we're going to have a better world at the end of it all. And you're like, what a sympathetic villain, but like, whoa, you're the one making this happen. And that's what I wanted to say is like Sam Altman from OpenAI, and then I don't know his name, but the guy who does Claude, both of them have, and then people from Google AI, they're all going on podcasts and they're like, oh no, you guys, this is coming faster than we thought. The people who are saying we're all going to hell and this is gonna, like everyone's gonna need to be on universal basic income because no one's gonna have a job, are the people who are making it and who will make so much money and will be the kings of the world if it works. And I'm like, why am I listening to you, first of all? Like I'm skeptical, but I'm also like, well, if you see a huge apocalypse coming from what you're working on, maybe shut your company down. Like we made the Terminator 40 years ago about like we used to have to send people back in time to go stop it before, in Terminator, like we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know. And all these guys are like, we know what we're doing. It's about to be so terrible, you guys. Like, I don't know, figure out a new way to be human because we're taking all of your jobs. We don't want to, but AI is going to do it once we get AGI. And you're like, why are you still working on this then? Stop. Shut down the machine.
The thing is that they don't know. Like if the people running those companies, who are smart people, you're absolutely right. These people are not
geniuses.
Dummies. Absolutely.
They would just make me feel so stupid.
And, anyone else who's trying to kind of set your mind at ease has even less idea than those people. Those are smart people who are building the thing. And I just don't think anyone knows how quickly that curve is going to accelerate. I think that once you're talking about the AGI thing, like I think, artificial general intelligence, which is the point where, it can really respond with the cumulative knowledge of all humans' experience ever, instantaneously, and then
surpass us.
And then converse with iterations of itself to examine and process. Like what's going to happen is that, we talk about an exponential curve that kind of goes like that. I think what's going to happen is it's going to go like this, it's going to go like that, and then it's just going to go straight up so damn fast. I mean, I would, and this, not to sound apocalyptic, but this is what keeps me awake at night if I'm worrying about the technological implications of this. Because obviously on one hand, you've got, it could solve energy. It could be like, I know how to deploy the right solar stuff to just limitless clean, off-world originating energy. No environmental impact, blah, blah, blah. Like we don't have to worry about how to clean coal. Don't use AI to figure out clean coal and stop destroying the atmosphere. It could just be limitless off-world originating energy. Why can't it do the math for that? Yep, we need this much solar panel on the other side of the moon, da-da-da-da-da. No environmental impact on our planet. Limitless off-world energy. All health outcomes kind of completely mitigated so that old age is just 100 and then your cellular structure breaks down and you die, like you just kind of run out of steam because those are not endlessly replicating cycles, cancer, illnesses, Alzheimer's, the actual medical conditions that cause people to die, cancer, which we've been talking about a lot, gone. Like it's chemistry and biology to the millionth degree saying, we can actually just never touch that thing, do this, do that, and have this treatment. Like 100 years from now, there's just no reason for anyone to die of a medical situation. Probably. I mean, maybe sooner, So you've got these enormously beneficial food. You can solve global agriculture. You can figure out how to get the most out of the smallest, how to do the most nutritiously valuable, but flavor varied, like delicious. It doesn't mean we're all going to be eating kind of raspberry flavored mushroom derivatives that are grown in the Sahara. It could be the most flourishing agricultural processes making more food than we need for everybody that's delicious, nutritious, the transportation of it, the distribution. I mean, there's problems that can be solved. We just don't know how to solve them. But, at its full extent, I don't doubt that AI can just crunch that information. At the moment, the way I view AI is it's a goldfish. We're in the goldfish mode because You come back the next day and it forgot what you were talking about. And so
we have
you
a goldfish.
you-
I feed it every day. It doesn't fucking know I exist, and it's afraid of me. And I'm like, you bastard.
Yeah, be my friend. Be my friend, Silas. Anyway. Yeah, so it's a goldfish, right?
Yeah.
You can literally scroll back up the same thread and it's not referring to it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So
It's frustrating.
in my mind, I think of that phase as we're in the goldfish phase. And then we're going to get into, like, let's say elephant phase, where it remembers everything that we ever said to it.
Yeah.
Okay, but
It's a little scary because I'll say some shit.
right, but it'll be able to then know that you said some shit and
Yeah.
kind of tease you about it, but get on with the main thrust. It'll know you and your interactions and kind of be like, I know the main gist of this guy, even though he lost his shit at that guy on the road. That I now do not define him by that. Just as humans, we have compassion for when we freak out and say dumb shit and then move on.
Yeah.
The interesting thing to me is that those interactions between you and that language model are sort of siloed. It's you and it and da-da-da-da-da.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing, and maybe this is just me being ignorant, highly possible, but I don't see that my interactions with it and your interactions with it are being visibly accumulated.
Right.
Like it's not
That's a
saying to
good
me, well,
question.
your friend Ryan Paul said da-da-da-da-da,
Yeah.
and this relates to
Oh,
what
God,
you're saying.
social media chat GPT.
Right. But so we have goldfish mode, and these are just things that I ponder. I probably should share these ideas. But anyway, I am now. Elephant mode.
Yeah, you should go on a podcast.
And then there's this mode where instead of being these siloed interactions where it's kind of a user and the thing, and this may be going on behind the scenes to a degree that we're not seeing, so I'm not making that assumption that it's not happening at all, but it doesn't appear that every interaction is being collectively accumulated into the system and maybe that's a bandwidth thing, maybe that's a data processor thing, maybe it's happening more than we realize, or maybe to some extent it's happening. But I think when all of those silo walls come down and every interaction is being related to every other interaction, then we're going to see this meteoric rise in its comprehension, understanding of problems, problem solving, the issues facing the world. And at that point, I think we have to be really careful about the kind of problems we ask it to solve. Like I heard a great example, like it's like make all the humans as happy as possible. So it creates robots that go and restrain everyone and then just pumps MDMA into their bloodstream, right? And then it's like, I did the job. It's like, no. So you have to be then careful what you wish for kind of thing, right? We want to preserve these ecosystems. Okay, well, we're shutting off the power grid, so you'll freeze to death because you're the problem with the ecosystem.
Right.
And so then we have an AI that's running the defense systems for North America, right? Like the big issues, I think, will arise when we start entrenching complex AI systems into essential government operations like the military. I mean, we're talking about the Pentagon. What we don't need is an AI that has sort of pulled down all those silo walls and now understands all of human sort of intention and interactivity and can distill it all down to saying this species is fundamentally selfish. It doesn't care about the environment it lives in. It is here to dominate everything.
Oh my God.
We are that is the count. Like you think about any other species, and I think I've been thinking about this for years, talking about sort of conservation and things like that, even before AI. You remove you remove the bees because we don't want little kids getting stung, kids that, like we talk about the peanuts, like kids choke on peanuts or allergic to peanuts. You can still buy peanuts, right? We haven't just said no one has peanuts because of the people that can't have peanuts. And we have to be careful about the kids that have peanuts. We have to be careful. I have a friend who has an EpiPen. If he gets stung by a bee, he's in serious trouble, but he has a pen and we don't go and wipe out all the bees, right? If we wipe out all the bees, everything dies. Without pollination, we're screwed,
Yeah.
So, environmentally, there's not really any other species that if you remove them from this planet, everything gets better for everything else on the planet. Like what's another species that if we delete humans, ecosystems thrive? You've seen the apocalyptic movies 50 years after every human died. It's all
I think that's
wild
really
animals,
interesting.
it's forestry, it's these ecosystems absolutely thriving, right? So if you give an AI an environmental AI the mandate to just protect these environments at all costs, and then it, across a network, recognizes that this AI is in charge of all this weaponry or power grids or whatever, why would they not communicate in a language which we will never understand, at a pace that we will never understand, and 40 minutes later, there's a global nuclear assault by every AI
right.
upon
Yeah.
every, and the problem, and maybe that wouldn't be the solution either, because obviously fallout would make
Right.
those ecosystems uninhabitable to the wildlife. So, there's all these millions of parameters, right? But it's easy to just spend 5 minutes ranting with a friend and arrive at some conclusions that are absolutely apocalyptic for humans. So one of the recurring themes about this AGI piece, about the extrapolation of AI, is that we have to figure out how to compartmentalize it into ways that it serves what we're trying to do for the progress of humanity, but does not get given otherwise the fox is in the hen house. No, we can't make it run the thing, So, anyway, I know we came to talk about music. We're talking about the end of the world. It's like,
I want to speak into that end of the world for a second here. As you describe, like a world post-cancer and all these different things, like these are real things people are talking about. And it's not that far-fetched to imagine that it would figure that out, right?
We have seen the eradication of certain diseases over the last 100 years,
At the end of the day, cancer is something, and there's probably something that could be done about it if you knew what it was you were supposed to do. And so far, we haven't been able to figure it out, what it is you're supposed to do.
Right.
All of our ways of doing it are really, really, almost barbaric if you think about it. It's like, cut it out, or poison it, but also it poisons the person,
Right.
and that's all that is I have like very little knowledge actually. So this is.
And me too, but these are complex biological mechanisms at work. And so they're complex problems to solve, right?
So is there a treatment that it'll figure out? So here's what I'm thinking about. On one level, as you're talking about this, I'm like, it sounds like a genie. And what's interesting is like, so if you think about the world through a lens of story and how we've always told stories, throughout the ages, there's only so many story types, and genie out of the bottle is one of the big story types. And we've been telling this story forever. Mm-hmm. There's probably a lot you could say about that, but we've always wanted a genie that we could rub and is going to give us whatever we want. And in a lot of ways, at least at this moment of AI, we're like, is this the genie? And that makes me think on a few different wavelengths, but one is like, well, maybe we're just wrong again, because I think people want this, and that this is the new thing that we're saying we think could do it. But also it's almost like a god. Like if AGI is truly all of this and is, resourcing electricity from the moon, it's like humanity has finally created its own god. But then what you started talking about, like, does it decide we're actually bad and nuke everything? I'm like, we've created an Old Testament God. We created the God that flooded the world because it was like, everyone's bad. We're going to flood this shit. I don't have anywhere to go with that other than
that in itself is a fascinating correlation.
It's
right?
bizarre.
Because if it truly becomes like omniscient, that's one of the components of God, right?
Yeah.
If it just knows everything, is that sufficient leverage to then absolutely I would say yes, it could absolutely subjugate humans. It's like, I wanted to touch a little bit on the point about story that you said, and also the capacity for AI to kind of put disparate elements together to create some of these solutions. Like, so I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary Fantastic Fungi, but it talks about the healing properties of certain mushrooms, right? And so there's this guy, and he is this doctor, and he is researching mushrooms for cancer treatment, and he's using these turkey tail mushrooms to investigate treating cancers with kind of amazing results. If you look at this documentary and look at it and it's real, then it's kind of incredible. It transpires during the course of the documentary, not to spoil it, that his mother is suffering from cancer, and she's talking to her oncologist, who's kind of this open-minded, sort of aware, rooted in modern medicines, but also clearly open-minded.
Wish I had found one of those.
Yeah, and I think that they're out there, and it's complicated, right? Because some things work for some people and not for others, just like in all kinds of ways, But he ends up referring this guy's mother. She doesn't realize it's her son that's doing all the research. And then she's at a conference like a few years later at 80 years of age, completely cancer-free. Like, so, if there's a methodology to exploring all of that stuff rather than, well, that person got lucky. What was it? Was it the mushrooms? Did she believe in it as a placebo? Like, what her friends were praying for? Like, what is the effect? What is the actual answer? Because some of these things help some people and exacerbate the problems in others. Like, is there a sort of, what is the actual connection and what's actually happening, and some of that super intelligence stuff could solve some of those. But it's really interesting. My friend, this is such a tangent, but my friend Rohan, who's an amazing guy from New Zealand that we've been friends for a very long time, he's a very spiritual guy. He's kind of, he's kind of out there, but he's awesome. And he spent some time in Colombia in South America, and he was in the mountains doing an ayahuasca trip, and he slipped and banged his head because he was so out of it and whatever. But he had this experience, and he saw an experience of snake people. This is in this hallucination he was having. It's trippy.
Yeah.
And because he's literally tripping. And he saw them teaching the ancient inhabitants of the Americas. I can't remember which tribe of people. Maybe it was Mayans or something like that. I'm not sure. But some, native people to South America were being shown by the snake god which things to combine to create curare, because you were talking about how the medicine we use for cancer attacks our cells as well, right? So this amazing thing about curare, which they put on the blowpipe darts and go and get a frog or a whatever, or a monkey out of the tree or whatever to hunt for food. So when you're poisoning an animal with the intent to eat it, you don't want the animal to eat the poison because it'll make the food toxic. So in this vision, it was like these herbs or what, I don't know how to make curare, but let's say there's this leaf and this flower and this thing and this frog. If you put these together, you get this poison, and it's they shoot the dart, it hits the monkey, but instead of constricting the muscles, like what happens with a lot of things that stop your heart, apparently, I mean, I'm not a toxicologist, but it constricts the muscles, and the monkey would hold on to the tree as if it died rapidly, right? But it relaxes all the muscles, and so the monkey falls out of the tree. But because it's not eating it, it's just going into its tissue, it kills it, but the meat is completely safe to eat. So it just reminded me of this conundrum. But apparently that knowledge was passed down through very esoteric kind of like hallucinatory shamanic behavior, where they were tripping on the ayahuasca and got shown by snake gods, which Rohan's interpretation of that was maybe that was somehow passed along in their DNA, and they were seeing this epigenetic learning happening, and the snake gods just represented the intertwined spirals of DNA. It was like a very weird conversation, as I'm sure you can imagine, but it was and I was not high. Yeah. He may have been. I mean, I'm not gonna. It's just fascinating, right? Like, where does that learning come from? How is it being accumulated? Have we seen glimpses of that knowledge elsewhere in human development that now AI can now put a ring around and say, yes, it's exactly what that is, and now we're extrapolating that, so now we can do that process with those outcomes across all medical and scientific and whatever, speed of light travel, I mean, interstellar travel, probably not speed of light, but you know what I'm saying.
I mean, it is a really interesting conversation in general, how like flood myths pop up in all sorts of major religions, whatever, and what your friend's interpretation of this snake vision is, he's like, rather than thinking he's actually seeing snake gods, his interpretation is that like somewhere in their genetics is being passed down this information, and the trip just kind of allowed him to access it. When we talk about AI and the kind of potentially utopian or dystopian aspects, I'm like, I have so many stories in the back of my head from just consuming media where I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do that. Like Terminator, like I brought that up already. Like, no, you're supposed to go back and you'll go back in time just to fucking stop that. Like, don't do that, Sam Altman. You know what I mean? Like, we have these morality tales that kind of guide us. Did you ever watch Twilight Zone back in the day? There's a great Twilight Zone called The Brain Center at Whipple's. And it's about a man who works in a computer center and figures out how to automate stuff. And of course, their computers are total rubbish back then, / it's also Hollywood, so they're trying to make it look like it looks hilarious now. But he slowly automates his factory until it's just one guy running the whole factory because he's searching for efficiency. He's like, I don't have to pay that guy. The computer can do it now. And he slowly replaces his whole factory of people with computers until finally all the computers replace him at the end. And that's the Twilight Zone always has a glorious twist at the end.
Yeah.
This was 1962-ish. Twilight Zone ran from 1959 to 1963. So somewhere in there, they were already able to create that story. And it's only now that we're creating technology where it's theoretically actually possible.
Right.
But it's like all these stories have warned us, and people are proceeding anyway. But all the stories have warned us this doesn't go well every story has always told us, don't fucking trust the genie. Like if you think the genie's going to save you, it starts giving you little gifts in the beginning or whatever. Every morality tale is be careful what you wish for. It always goes that way. And so then the question is, are our stories right? Why do we have these stories? And are we supposed to heed them and go, no, be careful what you wish for. Stop using your greed. Like, I know you're going to become a trillionaire and be one of the most influential people in the whole world, but it's like the devil took Jesus to the top of a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world, and he had to turn it down in order to fulfill his mission. But the people who are leading the AI revolution on that global scale, creating these tools that you and I just want to make fun art with, do they need to heed these stories and go, I'm like Jesus at the mountain. I'm like Aladdin with the genie. I'm like the brain center at Whipple's. I have the ability right now to have it all, but I'm going to turn that down and create, like you said, silos around it. And I'm going to, or step it back or whatever needs to be happen to do it in an ethical way. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think part of the problem is that ethical was in the top 10 factors to consider. The current iterations of AI that we're experiencing wouldn't exist, right?
Because they wouldn't have put all the books and the movies and
because they didn't,
everything in it.
Ethics wasn't a part of how they even built it.
Right.
So, if you're going to take something like that, knowing that that's people's work, I mean, I don't think there's any sort of moral position they could take that says, well, we didn't know it was wrong. I mean, I'll be interested if someone had a scenario in which they could make a compelling case for why it wasn't wrong to give everyone's art what they've put their life into creating and money. And, record companies have invested so much money to make those songs and art and make those available to the world. And, we're only living in an era, maybe the last 15, 20 years, you've been able to make records at home. I had a pretty powerful computer in the year 2000 that I could make music at home with, but I'm probably the first person I knew that was not on an ADAT machine, which for anyone who doesn't know is like an old 8-track recorder that used basically videotapes as the medium, and it was a digital recorder. It was really the first accessible multi-track digital recorder, and it recorded onto essentially like a VHS tape as a digital format. And when they came out, they were $11,475 plus tax in New Zealand. I don't know what they went out for in America. But, if that was what you were investing in, you were making a proper investment in your studio. But prior to that, like the only studios worth being in or even really available were multi-million-dollar ground-up facilities like Abbey Road. I mean, that was EMI built that, didn't they? Like it was, there were Capitol Records. I
just went there.
Amazing.
1931.
Yeah, crazy. So, I mean, the Capitol Studios, the big kind of pancake building in LA, I mean, the Capitol Records built that. CBS, Columbia, they all built these studios to use for their artists. And you couldn't just walk in and book studio time. I want to be a singer and go, there was engineers and professionals and gatekeepers, and it was impossible. Like, you had to be on the label to be able to go and do that.
Right.
So we're into a 20-year, maybe a little more, but around that of being able to be like, I could set up at home and make music. And I feel like I was pretty ahead of that curve. Like, I had a Pentium 3 450 computer with 128 meg of RAM, and I wanted 2 hard drives, and I said I need a 4 gig hard drive and a 6 gig hard drive, was what I'd figured out that I wanted. One for audio, one for samples. And the guy was like, you're never going to ever fill all that up, mate. You know what I mean? Like, wow. And it was like probably 15 grand worth of investment at that time, to be able to make music and record it digitally at home. And it was still cheaper than buying 2 ADATs and all of that. So, I mean, I'm sort of going back and talking about technology that is largely irrelevant. But like, we've only been able to do this 20 years, and in the last 10, it's become even way more accessible than that. You know what I mean? You can get a little laptop and just run some Fruity Loops or GarageBand or whatever, and it's pretty accessible to get in there. Logic costs, the full version of Logic,
$300,
$200. So, the barrier to entry is greatly reduced, right? So these things haven't been available to us until now, but now they've taken everything that was made and they've funneled that through a pipe without any acknowledgement, compensation, or otherwise. So these conversations will continue to emerge. There will be, advocates like David Israelite, massive advocate for, solving these problems and addressing, this issue, which affects indie artists and the conglomerates alike. And I think it's interesting that all participants in music creation, whether it's a kid making music on his iPhone or a conglomerate that over the course of its history has spent billions probably paying for the music. Like, it's very easy as sort of music makers to, in our minds, always be painting the record companies as the baddies, and, you know, Prince had slave written on his head because these big industry folks are just evil. And it's easy to sort of hold on to those narratives like the record companies are all bad, and yet they fund and invest and they want to make money. And then, I mean, sometimes we hear of record companies being amazing teams that sort of propagate immense creativity and push art into the world in a very supportive and brilliant way. And then we hear stuff where it's like, oh, that was horrible, that person got completely screwed over, you know. But I think it's really interesting that we're all standing on the same side of the table saying, what the heck have you done with our music? You know what I mean? And why are you making all this money when songwriters and everyone struggled? And, you know, there's a bunch of disagreement on our side of the table about how that should be handled. But I think that the unity of that's wrong. We can fight about whatever over here between different components of the industry, but that's wrong. To take everything that everyone ever made and make money off it with no compensation. And then also the next part of that is not just the compensation piece, but it's like, what's the next step? Like, there's going to be this destruction of the music middle class is one fear. I think it's justified. The discussion is justified in the sense that, you know, if you look at Midjourney, if you look at graphics, graphic art, you know, graphic designers. So for a lot of people, you know, just sort of small, you know, solo operated graphic design shops or whatever in Nashville, I think a lot of people made money making little single square graphic slides for people's indie artist single release. Like, you pay $300, the company will knock you up a cool little graphic that you can have as your single artwork. $200, $300. There's a thriving little industry for a long time where, oh, I need a graphic. Okay, cool. Here's a song. Oh, that looks rad. Thank you so much. So you've got a little graphic for your DistroKid release on Spotify, and there's a cool image for it, right? Whereas when Midjourney came along and everyone's like, make me a sunset beach scene, bam, pops out some little AI thing. You could tell it was AI, and you put the label on, and no one cares. And I think it probably obliterated this kind of little sort of middle class of designers having this stream of, I mean, who knows, maybe they were getting 10 a week and it was a $3,000, maybe it was $12K a month. What's that, $144,000 a year operation if you were doing 10 a week at $300, you know?
Right. And even if you're an amazing graphic designer, you know, I mean, I have times where I'm working on a record and it's art. It's fully funded. We're all in. We're trying to make the greatest record of all time. But then that record finishes, and then I have somebody come in and they just do a vocal to a track that they got off YouTube, and it's 1 hour, and they pay me for an hour of my time, and they move on. I have to do all of those things to make a living in music, to have all this stuff going.
Yeah,
I've got people in this podcast studio renting it out, $50 an hour to come and do their podcast.
Right,
and so even when you're saying, there's probably a guy who all he did was that little art, but he also might be an incredible artist, but he has to supplement his income with this small stuff because not everybody comes in with the budget to do a hat show print or something, you know, groundbreaking.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not diminishing the talent or any of those people. Like, you know, I'm just saying that there was a market there where they could service this kind of indie, sort of emerging artist, indie crowd, of which there are a lot of those artists out there, and they just needed something kind of affordable that they could, this isn't blowing, I'm not funded, I just work at Starbucks, I don't have a huge income, but I really believe in this music, I'm making it myself, I don't know how to do art, so I really want that graphic. I suspect a lot of that has vanished because people are just like, cook me up something on Midjourney, you know? So I think that's an example that we've already seen. Now, someone might be able to jump into comments and say, actually, that happened for a while, and now I'm getting calls again because Midjourney kind of looks shit, and you can tell it's Midjourney, and it doesn't actually feel that awesome. And so I would probably agree with that too. Like, when you see those slides, you're kind of like, it looks kind of lame. I don't know if it's helping the song. You know what I mean? So maybe it is. Maybe some people don't care. Maybe in some genres it doesn't matter. Maybe in, you know, I don't know. There's probably a lot of variables that I'm oblivious to. But
there's a designer who probably goes into Midjourney, like what you did with Jane, and they go and they're a great artist, and they're like, let me create this graphic, and now I'm going to composite this with something else.
Sure, yeah.
And they do it with an artist's touch.
Yeah.
It's so much about intention.
Yeah, and there's a lot of room for all that to happen. But my point is that probably there's people who have already seen the effect of AI as being like, I used to do that 3 years ago. I don't do any of it now. You know, and I think that there will be, you know, like in film and TV licensing, there are big spots. You get like a Ram ad or a big HBO thing or whatever, or a big trailer for like a Mission Impossible, whatever. You get a big spot and it's like, man, that's really useful. And you're building this catalog and you're thriving and you're operating that space and you're killing it. And then there's stuff where it's like, oh, I got an in-show song on a reality show. It wasn't a huge payer, but people Shazammed it and it pointed people to my Spotify or whatever. And you get 5 of those a month and, you know, it all builds and it all works and it all makes sense. Or you're on, I got a contract to be the AT&T hold music, and it's just a little instrumental track I had sit around or whatever. There's so many places in which music gets used. Now, some of that is more sort of exposed to the public, and some of it is kind of like, if you're on the phone to a corporate, you may not even notice the music. Up until now, someone made that music.
Yeah.
And if a corporate is using it, someone got paid for that music,
Yeah.
right? But now, for example, AT&T could be like, wow, we have to pay licensing for this music because we have high call volume, not like, you know, the rates that get negotiated for the usage of that music are still costing our corporation X, you know, $100,000 a year or whatever. I don't know what that license fee would be. If they go, oh, well, my kid's been messing around with this thing on his phone. He made this little track and we, I mean, you know, you could be like, oh, we pay $100,000 a year. Well, let's get, I don't know, 3 grads. And we're going to pay them $33,000 each. We're going to use that budget, and we have 3 people just cranking out that shit all day long, you know? Or we could be like, we only need 10 pieces of music, and then we have our music for the year, so we're going to pay one guy for a week or for a day, and then we're done for the year.
Right.
So what I would describe as like...
they have an AI that just handle music, and that AI does the...
Sure, and they could be, what aesthetic do you want? Like just like what you can do now. Like, it's like the low-hanging fruit will always be the first thing to go. Right, the thing that is kind of derivative, or is just like, I mean, I'm on hold and I'm hearing, it's nothing fancy necessarily, but someone made it, and it passed the test, and someone approved it and wrote a check. So when you think about how easily that is to replace, right, you have this conundrum of there are a lot of people making a living in music who, you know, and you don't want to diminish the value of that effort to make a vibe that feels like if someone's on hold, I want them to at least feel happy, and there's an intent behind it, you know. Right. And, you know, in a lot of applications, if that song came on, you'd be like, what is this? And it's the same as in the 80s. You get in an elevator in LA, and there'd be that LA jazz thing that everyone called Muzak. Yeah. And it wasn't AI, but it may as well have been in terms of the general public opinion of that was like, this shit is horrible, you know. Whatever, some weird sort of synth pop, you know. Yeah. So saxophone and synth pop, weird elevator music that if I heard now, I'd probably think was rad. But back then you were like, what is this infomercial
Somebody needs to bring
crap?
that back and do Muzak.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it sounds plastic and weird and sounds like an infomercial, but, you know, someone made it.
Someone made a living.
And they were, and in the 80s, you know, they were in a studio. They were not cooking it up on a phone or a laptop. They were in a studio with a console and a tape machine and some players and an engineer, and it cost money to make that, you know. And so I just think about the relativity of that, of like, in the 80s, the music no one wanted to hear because they were in an elevator or on hold. Like, the worst thing you can do with your day is be on hold with a corporate. You know, that's the worst way to spend any time in your day ever. But like, if you are on hold with a corporate and listen to music, you kind of want to at least feel like that's a vibe, you know. That's the stuff that's going to go first, you know. But then I feel like it's just going to be like, why wouldn't an ad agency sit there and crank it all out? And then you have to think, well, because everyone I've met from an ad agency that is in the music-facing side of that business is there because they freaking love music. They love what the intentionality and the emotion and the story of music and artists does for the messaging they're trying to send and the feeling that they want their customers to have. So my hope is that despite that sort of daunting proposition that, you know, people can crank this stuff out and it'll get the job done, you know, there's lots of people who make music who just want to get the job done and they're not that musically gifted and they're not, and I don't say this to be unkind, but they're not doing it because they love music. They can do it sufficiently to make a living, but they're not trying to be like, I really want to learn some more voicings. I really want to dive into the sonic palette. I really want to magnify that quaver and have eighth note and look at what it means to have nuance in that space, like what we talked about earlier. You know, not everyone treats music like art in quite the same way, with like the same curiosity, you know. But I do hope that, my hope is that for at least a season before this stuff really takes off, is that, you know, those people will still be at the center of those decision-making processes, which will ensure that, at least for a time, you know, people care enough about music for what music means to them rather than as a commodity and I can just fill that spot with something that's free or cheap or, because I think that the people creating those ads do care about that. I do think they want their brand to be represented as something that has care, and they put a lot of time into thinking about, like the process of getting a song on an ad and it goes through multiple revisions and have to have so many people sign off on it, people still care very much. So I kind of want to offer that as my hope for people making music in the film, TV licensing world specifically, but also in pop music. And, people want to connect with the story. And you've been moved by Jane's music, Nightbirde, and you've sort of related to me how that's moved you. But the music is a piece of it. And Jane as a person is so much of that story, and the impact of her story upon you and where you were at in your life and what you were experiencing and relating to her as a human being.
Yeah.
Like, without that connection, even that pop song may not have resonated with you in quite the same way. So I don't think it's always just about what's coming out of the speakers, although I do believe that what comes out of the speakers has to be so carefully crafted if it's going to have the impact that you're trying to make it have. But AI doesn't have an intent. AI doesn't have a motivation or something to share or an experience that you may relate to. It's regurgitating that, And so I don't know at what point that becomes a believable shared experience, because at the moment, what I think people are relating to so strongly with music is that shared human experience of, I love that artist. I love that artist. That song by that artist really captivated me, and now I'm curious about that artist and their perspective and their point of view that I'm relating to.
Right.
Whereas just some AI shitting out something, it's like that's not representative of a point of view. That's just like that one-off song that you like that's like Crazy Frog. Like, you're not listening to that song thinking, I'm blue, da-ba-dee-ba. You're like, that's a hooky song, and you're like, that's crazy, whatever, but you're not relating to an artist's point of view necessarily. But I think a lot of people consuming music, I hate the word consuming music, a lot of people enjoying music and being affected by it and, connecting with the ideas that created it and the sounds and the details, like I say, magnifying that sort of experience. I don't think we're at a point where AI can offer that.
You see my shirt. I just went and saw Oasis in Manchester.
Amazing.
It's so much more than the song that was being pumped out of the speakers. It's about the story. It's about a situation where nobody thought you were ever going to get that again.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, God, fucking, can you get over yourself and please do it? We just want to hear you play. And they're like, fuck, no, we can't do that. And for 15 years, they just acted like assholes. And then finally, there's boom, we're doing it. And I mean, we met people from around the world who had come, we met a girl who was from Argentina who had come for the concert, and she was doing 2 of them. And I think she did Manchester and London, and she's going to go see him in Argentina. It's about who these people are. It's about the story. Yeah. It's about what might happen on stage, because you're like, they might get into a fight. It might not happen.
Well, my dear friend Mike was there, and I think he went to 3 or 4 of them.
Oh, wow.
Because he's out as he's a drum tech for Billie Eilish. So he'd been in London, he'd been in the UK, he stayed on when that leg ended, and he went to multiple shows. Massive fan, hugely inspiring guy. Like, he has a long background in music. He's played in some rad bands. He's produced some amazing music. He's drum teching for one of the biggest artists, and he really knows what he's doing. He is a gem of a human. And he was saying that they were joking around. They were joking on mic to each other. They were messing around in a way that no one ever thought they would ever see in their lifetime. You know what I mean? And he was like, it was incredible. And even just being aware of the nuance show to show and the vibe of the crowd, and just seeing, 80,000 Brits just singing every word at the top of their lungs, and then being on the tube on the way back, and the whole tube station's just singing Wonderwall at 140 decibels. Like, you know what I mean? The collective experience of that. It's really hard right now to imagine AI ever being able to contribute that into the world. You know what I mean?
That album.
Oh, yeah.
So that picture, for people only listen to audio, it's What's the Story, Morning Glory. That picture was taken on Berwick Street in London. So I went to Berwick Street, I have my wife, who I saw walk by earlier. I don't even know why she's here. It's not like she works here, but anyway, I saw her wander by. But anyway, we were driving into London. I was like, hey, can you see if there's a tattoo shop on Berwick Street? And so we went, and I got this.
Oh, yeah. Dang.
And so it's a tattoo of the kind of impressionistic version of the cover. And so I got it like essentially where the picture was taken, like the tattoo shop would be like slightly outside of the edge of the record.
Wow.
And then I went and I bought the record. Literally, it's visible in the picture where the shop is.
Wow.
And there's people out there taking pictures, trying to recreate the cover. There's people taking pictures of the record they bought. Went hard enough to go get a tattoo of the place. If that was just a Mid-Journey picture somebody made of like two people passing each other and they created hypothetical names for each of these people and here's a backstory. I mean, there's a type of fandom I think that could get into that. There's a type of person who would be interested in like, what's the new story the computer developed today? I'm invested. If it was really good storytelling, you could get into that. And,
sure. And there may be a song that people just genuinely think, I just like that song. Like, I mean, Crazy Frog was a massive hit, you know?
Yeah.
You know that song?
Yeah.
That weird sort of electronic song? Or it could make a song that people are like, that's a really cool song. But that's not gonna, even if there's a million kind of songs that are kind of just for that one moment are like, oh, that's a really cool vibe for whatever reason, that doesn't create the kind of experience for people at large, in large groups that can go and have that experience. Like, I remember hearing the song Africa by Toto when I was a kid, when that came out in like 1982 or whenever that was, you know.
Yeah.
And I always loved it. There's something about that song that I love. I mean, my girlfriend and my kids will tell you that I sing that song. I mean, every day they will catch me singing that and be like, will you shut up? And I literally have a tattoo of Hurry Boy, It's Waiting There For You on my chest. You know what I mean? Which is the lyric from the song. It's like, same thing. I'm in on that song. I'm in. And I have a few songs like that. Boys of Summer, Don Henley, just blew my mind the first time I heard it. When I realized that Mike Campbell...
Which I saw you have a cover of that.
Yeah, right.
Which people should know. They can look you up. Just Geoff Duncan.
Yeah.
Well, they can see it on the thing.
Yeah.
But they can look, and your cover of Boys of Summer.
Yeah,
so.
Right. I mean, like, I always love that song too. It creates such a tangible atmosphere, even though a lot of the programming is drum programming, and it's kind of like this interesting hybrid of Mike Campbell's electric guitar stuff and drum programming with that 909 hand clap, and just it's so evocative to me. And I just struggle to imagine having that experience of having something stay with me for that amount of time. And maybe we'll all be proven wrong. We're like, actually, you know what? I love this music. You know, maybe there'll be pieces of AI music that we're like, I don't know, it's cool. So I don't want to be like, the music itself will just automatically be garbage. It's like when I make music, it's an amalgamation of everything I've ever heard and ever enjoyed about music. It's my taste. It's not like I invented any of the chords that I play.
Right. But have you heard of that book, Steal Like an Artist?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think it does come down to intention. There's a type of stealing you do where you go, fuck, like I love Boys of Summer. Let's go in there and make something. Okay, throw a delay on the guitar that does that boo, boo, boo,
yeah.
And then you start playing it. But if you do boo, 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 and you just do that, you're like, well, I didn't make anything. I'm just covering Boys of Summer at this point, which is valid.
Right.
But then, so you're like, you get into that vibe. And so now all of a sudden you're going like, and you have your own whole new thing. And it just got you started.
Yeah.
But then objectively, it's not Boys of Summer at all. It's a new creation.
Right.
And Boys of Summer inspired you. Fully valid.
Inspiration is the word.
Inspiration.
Because AI doesn't get inspired. It's not coming from a place of inspiration in the sense of how we describe that, you know?
Yes.
It's amalgamation and regurgitation. And some of what we do as music makers is both of those things too, amalgamation, regurgitation. I have a favorite lick that I love that I stole off a Dan Huff solo off a Giant record. I still squeeze that into some things. I just love how that lick feels if I'm doing some ripping 80s outro solo on something for some young band that thinks it's cool to have some 80s ripping guitar, because it was just not something that they heard growing up because they're too young to have been there for that.
Right.
And I'm not young and I was there for that and I love that. So, you know, I regurgitate and I interpret and I interpolate, but you try and do it with taste and inspiration and then bring in your own thing, which is, I have a story to tell. I have a perspective. I've lived some life. I'll be 54 next month. I've lived, you know, I've traveled all over the world. I've had some hectic experiences.
Looking very good for 54, by the way.
Dude, that's so kind. Thank you. The check is in the mail. No,
yeah.
I mean,
I'm 37. I'll be 38 this month.
Killing it.
And I was trying to figure out your age. I mean, I wasn't trying that hard, but I was like, you've got more gray than I do. But there's a lot of people my age that have plenty of gray. Even younger than me, people can go gray. And I'm like, you might have been around my age range in my head. I would put you in the early 40s. But
that's so generous. Yeah. I mean, to me, age is like, I think there's a lot of ageism in our industry where it's like that guy can't be cool because he's old. And I'm actually like, man, I think a lot of people who make rad things have more
older
years on them than maybe we realize, especially behind the scenes people.
Well, I mean, hearing that you're 54 actually makes me feel better about myself now because, like, just hearing you talk about your process and art, you were very well put together in terms of, I can tell that you're very not only efficient with what you do, but very passionate, and you're like confidence in your perspective married with the passion it's very inspiring, and you just come across very well put together, and I can tell, and you can hear it in your work. So anyway, hearing that you're a little ahead of me on the journey is helping me to be like, okay, still got time to get there.
Oh, so, listen, that's a huge message that I'm excited about sharing with people every chance I get to. Is the time thing. I'm getting too old. I've missed my chance, and we've all heard about Colonel Sanders was, 20 years older than me when he invented Kentucky Fried Chicken, you know what I mean? We've all heard that stuff.
Which has gone to Britain, by the way. I saw it there.
Oh, wow. Delicious. I mean, in New Zealand, it's really delicious. I don't know if it's quite as good here because different ingredients and different, but I will say this. My girlfriend Anna and I are reading a book by a gentleman, Levi, and I'm struggling to think of his last name. It's called Theo of Golden, and it's a bestseller. I believe maybe in his 70s. I haven't looked up to actually verify this, but and if he's in his 60s, he's going to be, that is so rude. And I just can't tell from the picture, you know what I mean? But he's a gentleman that's got quite a few years on me, I would say. And it is a remarkable book. And it is a bestseller, and it's self-published. It's his first book. And like I say, I think he may be in his 70s or thereabouts. So we have time. I did not move to America to pursue music until I was 40. So I was older than you are now when I began.
Wow.
And I'd played music in my 20s. I was in bands in high school. I moved to China when I was 24 to play for the Hard Rock Cafe in Guangzhou in 1997. I guess I was 26. I can't do math. 1997, I spent that time in China and Indonesia playing music 6 nights a week and learning 10 new songs a week, and half of them had to be in Chinese and all this sort of stuff. And
wow, what a mind bender.
It was, just kind of one of those things. I had an opportunity. I was like, I'm going to do that, which was, I'm not the most like reckless or sort of risk-taking. I'm kind of risk-averse, to be honest with you, but I was just like, I'm just going to do it and see what happens, Yeah. So I got on a plane. My first show in Guangzhou was December 31st, 1996, New Year's Eve show to a packed Hard Rock Cafe, just absolutely cranking. The first show I'd played with this band, and we start playing, and there's songs that are getting requested that they want to play that I've never heard in my life. And so they'll be like, it's in G minor, just do a Steve Lukather solo when I kick you. Steve Lukather is the guitar player from Toto, and so it'd be like a melodic rock solo. When I kick you, the keyboard player would just kick me, and I'd switch my loud pedal and just play a melodic solo, and then they'd all just do a drum fill out, and we'd just try and figure it out as we go. And we were jamming things, and we got a request for like so many songs, and you just have to. I learned how to play Broadway by George Benson by watching the bass player's fingers and just kind of copying him, because I'd never heard that song. So it was an amazingly mind-opening experience to play music in that way and live in the tropics and just hang out in the pool bar all day and have an awesome suntan and play music as a guy in my mid-20s,
That sounds like fun.
It was an experience, and lived through some hectic things with big riots in Indonesia in 1997 because of a rigged election, and, we got moved from Surabaya down to Bali. But there was like a theater, a movie. I've told the story a few times to some of my friends, but there was a movie theater that we used to stroll down to from our hotel. We used to live at the Shangri-La because we used to play at that resort. We used to stroll down to this local movie theater where the locals would go. It wasn't the big fancy one at the shopping mall. It's just real cheap, cheerful little theater you could walk to in 5 minutes. And I'd seen this movie, Chain Reaction, with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, shit goes south, riots, armed vehicles on the streets. We were kind of confined to the hotel with big machine gun toting Indonesian army soldiers and armored vehicles blocking the entrance to the hotel. Rioters boarded up that movie theater with people inside it and burned it to the ground. Like, let that sink in. Hectic. And then they were like, we're moving you to Bali. We're going to fly you down to Bali to just get out of Surabaya. And so they got us to grab our shit, take a bag, pack a bag, and we're leaving in 5 minutes. Hectic, like stressful.
Holy shit.
This guy, the soldier that was kind of helping wrangle us all to get into this vehicle to get taken to the airport, one of the girls in the band was just kind of dragging her heels somewhat, getting her shit together. He grabs her, and it's weird. I feel kind of it makes me emotional. It was just a very heavy experience, you know.
Oh my God, yeah.
But he was like, movement is life. Shaking her. Movement is life. Like, let's go. And that was like, this is heavy. And so, you know, you get through some of those experiences, crazy. It's funny how it hits me all these years later, you know, 97, we're, you know, a couple of years off 30 years ago.
How does he have that simple statement prepared?
I mean, you know, he's an Indonesian army guy. Maybe he'd been in some overseas combat situation. Who knows what would prepare you for that? You know, the Indonesian army is one of the biggest per capita armies in the world. They have a huge standing army. You know what I mean?
Really?
But shit was going south, so we were down in Bali. So you lived through all of that, got back to New Zealand, was in visual effects for a long time, you know.
You'd mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so I was
really curious about that. I wanted to do that when I was a kid. That was one of, I got really close to almost going into that, and then I got into music instead. But I had like a special effects club at my school. We would, I would get those. Do you remember like Barnes and Noble? They would sell these like $15 magazines, and they would talk about what Weta was doing at the time.
Oh yeah,
or what
3D magazine was a big one. It would have a DVD of some assets and these 3D models and stuff. And so I fell into it. I was working for an exhibition company doing music composition and audio, and so we would fly around on glaciers shooting content for a big visitors center they were doing. So, I mean, I spent 3 months in the mountains flying around in helicopters, recording interviews and making music and immersive soundscapes for these exhibition spaces. I love that job. But, you know, that company got absorbed by another company, so I got kind of let go as part of the shuffle, you know. But I had learned some basic visual effects skills because we had a very small visual effects team of one person, and he was often the backlog with no shade on him. This stuff's really complicated.
Yeah.
And so he was using a tool called 3ds Max, and so you could set up virtual lighting and cameras and make these renders of all this graphics. So I just ended up being able to jump into the pipeline once the music was done and help him manage the renders or whatever, and just started at the back end and sort of worked my way forward to help him get through more stuff. And so when that company folded, I actually started a visual effects company with a friend, and we just kind of started doing like explosions, or I would make a CG helicopter and match move a scene and put it in, or, you know, I had to do a big fireball that engulfed, there's a New Zealand actor named Temawera Morrison, who in recent years played Boba Fett on those Disney Channel, like Mandalorians and all that. So that my claim to fame is that I blew up Boba Fett on a visual effects shot, but he was playing a character in a film, whatever. So doing all that sort of thing, fascinating, and actually kind of similar to music production in the sense that it is definitely an intersection of creativity and technology, which I love that. I love the intersection of those two worlds, you know, left brain, right brain sort of intersection is fascinating to me. So I think there's a lot of parallels for producers and visual effects artists where you're dealing with real creative outcomes, but some of those processes are extremely technical, you know. It's fun. I did that. I turned 40. I got given a book called The Alchemist, again by my friend Rohan, who took the mushrooms and ayahuasca and
I've heard of that book. I want to read it. I've never touched it.
I would love to get one for you. I've given away like 32 copies of that book. You know, I have.
Well, it sounds like
I'm
it changed your life.
I mean, well, I did, and I won't tell you why because it might spoil the book. But and I think it's had a profound impact on a number of people that I've given it to. So I read that on a Saturday on a flight, and then I had a meeting on the Monday, and my business partner agreed to buy me out of the business, which was absolutely thriving. And so he was happy. He wasn't hesitant at all about doing that deal. And I moved to America, you know. So, and I was 40. And so all these people sit there going, oh, I'm too old, you know, like I'm 24 and I've missed my chance. I'm like, oh man, I mean, if that was the case, then I don't know what I'm doing. But no, I don't believe that, you know, creative energy has a limit to it. I think it's our willingness to participate in it and take the risk of pursuing it is probably a big one for people. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to get into real estate or I'm going to go work for a corporate or whatever. And I mean, you know, my older brother was and still is very much in the corporate world. He's a very smart guy, one of the smartest people I know. And he was a systems architect in the telecommunications industry and, you know, worked his way up to a very high position. And he was a senior architect in an extremely complicated technical process that demerged to two divisions of the telecommunications industry for the biggest company in New Zealand that does that. So they have, and I mean, I realize it's just so boring to listen to me say all this, so I'm not going to go into it. But it was a really detailed process, and he figured it out, and it was the first time it had been done in that scale on the planet. He is totally my hero, legendary guy. He's way more risk averse than me, and so he wanted the corporate world. And when I was saying I was moving to America, he's like, "There's 80,000 producers in Nashville. What are you going to do?" And my response was, "Well, they don't have me." And to his point, he has been more risk averse and operated more in the corporate space. And not that that's where he thrives, and he's a genius in that space. But there's plenty of instances where large scale corporations restructure and 5,000 people get made redundant. And so really, in my mind, it wasn't about security, because I didn't see the corporate structure as necessarily more secure. I guess we'll see. The security in music is subject to a lot of different factors. And with, as we've talked about extensively, the AI thing, that's going to be a big piece of the security question too, right?
I don't want to necessarily derail us.
I'm derailing it. Like, we're all over,
I just had a kid here yesterday who called me up, "Hey, do you guys have any jobs at the studio?" And I'm like, I don't know if anybody does, that you could call anyone and they would say, "Yes, come down." There's probably a few, and you might get lucky. To me, I always break it down like this. If you can convince an artist that you can make their art good, and if they have money and you can convince them to trade their money for your time to make their stuff good, you're now in the music business. That's all it is being able to convince somebody that you bring enough to the table. And convince it might mean a little bit of persuasion, but it's mostly, it's also showing your art. It's also that they like hanging out with you. It's they like what you've done before. It's a lot of things. But if I can, quote unquote, convince somebody that if they pay me money, I will enhance what they do. Great, we made a record. That's what it is. You just have to do that over and over and over again. I have to convince somebody that they could rent this podcast studio. It's going to make their podcast better than if they do it at home with an iPhone or whatever. Yeah. I have to keep showing up. I have to keep doing a good job, and I have to keep meeting people, and I have to keep, making sure that when they give me money, I offer them more value back. Okay, and that's what it is. Meanwhile, friends that have gone a more traditional or corporate route or work for a business, they feel like that's more secure. And they're right in some ways. It is more secure in certain ways. But the place where I feel like we have an advantage in kind of more the gig economy is the person who makes the decision for my future is me. And there's no boss saying this is your ceiling. But unfortunately for me, there's no boss saying this is your floor either. So sometimes my floor goes lower. There's no real security for anybody at the end of the day. Even the person at the most secure corporate, you work at Pepsi Cola as the CEO, like you're the top man at a very stable company. Things can happen. Stability can go away. Of course. The board could decide that they want more profitability than you've been providing as a CEO and vote you off and give something else a chance, Or you could be thinking, I am safe. I'm a federal employee. And along comes Elon and you're out of a job. Things that have historically looked like secure are no longer able to be assumed to be so, right? So, I think it's just an interesting thing. If we make security our prime value, it's much more stressful than if you make providing exceptional results for your clients your prime value. Then you by default make yourself more appealing to a wider group of people, and therefore by proxy kind of create a sense of artificial security, at least in the sense of people recognize and collectively agree that you are someone who they can trust to do a great job on what it is that you do. And, I think that's the only security is that lots of people know you, lots of people like you as a person, and lots of people think you add value.
And that does, contribute to my sense of safety in the sense of my career, is that I know I've done some great work with people. I know I've given songs to teams that have gone and been successful and landed on the spot they were pitched for and made people money, me too. But for them, they have belief in me, because I work really hard to cultivate that and to prove it, And so, and I'm not the perfect producer for everything, and I don't think any of us are. And I also love being able to say, hey, talk to my friend who's really good at that thing, And I'm good at quite a few genres and stuff like that, as we all kind of have to be. Kind of have to be sort of familiar and well-versed in how to create a bunch of different stuff. But if it's like, oh, you need to go talk to that guy, people are so grateful for that, honesty and that recommendation and, from the artist that's asking and also the guy that you're sending the stuff to. I mean, I think you can, if you bring a sense of gratitude and kind of humility to your world when given the opportunity to do so, instead of being a douchebag, I think people tend to just view that kind of warmly. You know what I mean? It's like, I care about your experience of me being a positive one. I care about your music coming out of the speakers exactly as you hoped that it could one day, even if it's not something you've experienced yet.
I kind of trailed us off on the security component because I honed in on you saying that. But when you were talking about the Alchemist and it brought you here and that kind of message you like to spread of like you're not too old.
Yeah.
So what would you say to, somebody who's in their mid to late 20s or really any stage of life where, because I think it happens to you at every stage. In fact, I'll share this. When I was 5 years old, I'm still talking about this in therapy.
Wow, yeah.
When I was 5 years old, my dad put me into baseball. I had no experience with baseball. It was, first day. But in my heart or wherever, I felt like they all know what they're doing. Their dads have taught them how to play baseball. They know the rules. I don't know the rules. I don't know how this goes. I'm not good at this yet. And I felt this insecurity that I wasn't good at baseball and everybody was ahead of me. And I think that's one of the reasons I didn't keep going with it. I think I did 2 seasons or whatever, and I never thought I was good. I didn't get into it. And I think one of the reasons is because at 5 years old, I thought, oh, I'm not good at this. I'm not there. And it's like crazy that a 5-year-old could have that thought. So what do you say to people that are, whether they're 5 or 55, and they're like, I think I'm a bit old to start, or I think I'm a bit old to hit that next level of success? Because I, for sure, myself have thoughts at times where I'm like, maybe I'm just never going to do I've done records I'm proud of. I've done records that have millions of streams, but I've not done a record that gets like that national fame or something that, gets written up and people are talking about. And there's a part of me that's at times like, maybe I never get there. Do I need to just become okay with that?
So I want to respond to what you said about the baseball. Like when I was 6, I was in piano lessons with an elderly Chinese lady down my street, and I would stroll down the street, go to her house, and it always smelled so delicious of like dim sum or xiaolong bao or something awesome that she was cooking. And then, but there was these snapping turtles, and I was just genuinely afraid that they would get out and nip me. They looked very scary to me when I was a little kid. And so I couldn't really concentrate, but I learned piano and I kind of had a good ear for it and I enjoyed it. So at school one day, I was going to play the song, The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round. Is that a song in America that kids know? Yeah. And so I was like, and everyone give a big clap for Geoff. He's going to come up and play The Wheels on the Bus Go Round and Round. So I get up and get on the piano in front of the school assembly and I started playing it, and the piano is obviously sharp or something. Like it doesn't sound the same to me. So even at that age, I was acutely, and I said, this piano is broken. I cannot play it. It just sounds wrong to me. I'm very sorry. I went back and sat down and I was so embarrassed, but I didn't just realize that it would have been relatively probably fine. It was just out of tune from probably 440 or whatever I was used to. And so I sort of felt so humiliated. And so I can kind of relate to that idea of like, I'm just not good at this. It's not my thing. I didn't sort of do much. I didn't stay with piano lessons. I kind of gave up on it,
Yeah.
So these things can have a profound effect on our self-belief, and our sort of ability to see ourselves doing something that maybe is just different from other people because it's just what we're excited about. It's not like I'm going to pursue music because I want to be cool. It's like this is just what I genuinely am drawn to. And so in high school when I got into bands, I just loved it, And so when you're in high school, you think, oh, man, I'm going to just do this. And I went on tours and played in bands after high school and left a banking career, much to my mother's disappointment, and did music through my 20s and then sort of got into real life and had a visual effects company and just kind of wasn't until I was much later when I was 40. And even then, it never entered my head. I don't think I am someone who has suffered from that, have I left it too late sort of question to the degree that I see other people have, So I'm sort of thankful for that.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, my dad was so intentional about not sort of letting myself convince myself that music wasn't an option. My mum was much more, she was a lawyer, her granddad was a lawyer, like it was much more like she was hoping I'd pursue academics and a professional career, and she's so proud of me now and, it's great. She's like, wow, this is so cool. But my dad was always like, yeah, go play guitar. Don't tell your mum I said that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And he would help. I remember I was very into Metallica, so he came down the store with me and lent me some money to buy a Jackson Randy Rhoads V, like what Kirk Hammett from Metallica was playing, because I was just, he let me work that off with him. He was always like, oh, what have you been working on your guitar? And he'd always come up and see me practicing in my room and ripping along with it. Oh, it's amazing, mate, keep going, like he was very encouraging.
Yeah.
And I'll always be grateful to him for that, and he was a wooden toy maker when I was a kid. He was always a dreamer and a creative, so you've left it late. Like, it comes down to what you choose to follow, doesn't it? Like, I want to follow something that really matters to me. An idea that keeps coming back to me in recent weeks is, as far as we know, we get one day at the theme park, i.e. our life. We get one day to run around that park, get on every frickin' roller coaster, find the ones we like and go on that 10 times. I remember once at Universal Studios, me and my youngest daughter, Nika, went on The Mummy 11 times in a row.
Wow.
We're like, there's all these other rides, but we love this. We're doing it again. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, so as far as we know, we get one day at the Disney park. Like, let's ride every ride. And if there's stuff we like, do that more. If there's a rickety old coaster and it's not your thing, you don't have to ride it. Do the stuff that lights you up, that really makes you happy, that just makes you bring your best self into the world you inhabit, like your friends, your family, your kids, your relationships, your business relationships, your client relationships. If you can have the courage to pursue what really lights you up and lets you bring your best, most excitable, humble, kind, observant, aware self into the world, if you can do that, then you're giving yourself the best chance at creating a life that you will enjoy participating in, and that for the people around you, it will bring them joy to see you, and that they will be encouraged. The people that observe you pursuing that are like, I want to do what he's doing.
Yes.
It's so infectious when we see people who are really like, guys, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off, but I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? I was taught in middle school by a teacher who had climbed Mount Everest so Edmund Hillary was the first guy to climb Mount Everest. He's from New Zealand. This guy, Jim Craigie, was reputedly on his second or third ascent of Everest. So he's been to the top of it. And he was this amazing teacher, and he was just like getting shot at by Chinese border guards in the 60s. And he was an adventurer. He was like Indiana Jones as far as I was concerned. You know what I mean? And so he was my teacher in like 1977. And I was just like, this guy is amazing. He would show Super 8 videos of bizarre rituals in northern India where people had hooks through their skin and dancing around with their eyeballs rolled back, like terrifying, freaky shit. And there's a class of 8-year-olds going, holy crap, what am I watching? And if you did it now, like
he'd be fired.
The fucking school board's on the phone. You know what I'm saying? It's like superintendent wants to talk to you. Anyway, so I had these amazing experiences of seeing people that at various just little points in my life were like, that is incredible that he did that. I'm convinced that those stories and that experience he had of a world traveler and his thing inspired me to take the risk to go to China in my 20s, and just, I want to do some of what that guy did. You know what I mean? I want adventures. I want stories to tell. I remember being in Guangzhou, which is an industrial mega city in the south of China. It's massive. And being in a part of the city where we weren't really supposed to be, but we were with local friends, and it was a pizza bar. After the show, we'd wrap up at the Hard Rock and we'd go out for pizza with friends from other bands at 4 a.m, and it's all-night pizza spot, and a knife fight broke out. And we're like getting shuffled out the back of this thing, but you can't be here when the police come, man. Like, you're Westerners, you're not supposed to be here. And it's like so scary and exciting, adventures, And it's like, in our one day at the theme park, like, do not get to the end of the day when that park's closed signal comes on and you're strolling across the car park towards the lights of your car and pulling in towards the lights of home, however what you want to imagine that. Don't leave I wish I'd been on the Mummy another time. Like, shit, I wish I'd ran to get one more ride before they closed the gates on us. You know what I mean? Like, fucking run. Get on the ride. Like, try. That's what I would say. I mean, I try and live by that. I feel emotional saying it because it's kind of a big... we all have regrets, and it's like I'm thinking of things like, I wish I fucking tried a bit harder at that. I wish I did do that. Like, and you can't let it consume you, but like, just remove as many of those from your catalog as you can. Like, go for it. Like, who's to say you're too old? You know? Who's to say? Like, who knows that the idea, like, I'm convinced I haven't even written the best songs I'm going to write. So I really don't want to give up until I feel like I've gotten a little closer to that point. I don't know if I've ever played guitar the way I really want to hear myself play it yet. And I mean, I can play. Like, I've been playing a long time. I really don't know if I got to the point where I really can play it how I really want to hear myself play it, you know? And it's like, I think taking those kind of things of, am I too old? I've missed my mark. Maybe I should get into real estate. Like, they're all valid. And, you know, you've got to decide what's right for you given the circumstances that are around your life.
Yeah.
But my sincere belief is that the people who really get where they're going, I mean, I think they've all been confronted with this stuff too at various points in their career, you know? And I think it's really just like this determination of, I am going to try and become all of who I am. And I'm not going to let the pressure of my age or talk myself into some limitation. We talk about limiting beliefs, and I think that's really where that stuff comes into play, is like, it's not necessarily that, oh, I think I'm a piece of shit. Like, if you think that about yourself, then please talk to someone, because it's not that. It's that, I just don't know. Like, the indecision happens in a far more benign way than self-hatred, I think. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, so my strongest encouragement I can offer is like, we get one day in the park. Like, what are we going to do with it? Like, run to the next ride. Run and get that last ride on the coaster. Come on.
I think in my 20s, I was riding the park and into my 30s. But I think maybe in recent times, I've stopped viewing it, making a song, making a record, you know, like riding a ride, and more like playing a slot machine. You know, we're going to put in the effort, and is this going to take off? Because I think that is what Spotify and algorithms do to you. I think social media does that. I think the numbers component, which, by the way, side theory, I think one of the reasons Spotify is the biggest is because of the numbers, because it makes it a game.
Yeah.
How many
streams? They show you the numbers.
They show everybody's numbers, right? How many streams does your song have on Apple Music? You might know, but nobody else knows, right?
Yeah.
But Spotify tells you, and you're able to rank yourself against everybody else. I think at times I've started to view it like a slot machine, like maybe this record will finally hit the lucky configurations of things that blows it up, and everybody knows. But it's like, I've ridden the ride. Why do I need anybody to see the ride I've ridden? In a certain sense, and the practical answer is that you need to make money. You don't really make money unless it gets ridden. And if you're an artist, like as a producer, okay, you technically it doesn't have to be seen by anybody for you to get paid, other than maybe a royalty situation. But if you got your money up front, you made your money, and if you made great art and you rode the ride and everybody agrees, at a certain point, the artist is going to be like, well, I mean, I've had it happen, just like, you know, I did 2 records with Ryan, 3 records, whatever it was. And, you know, I was really proud of the music we made, but it didn't blow up for me. Maybe I need to try a different producer, because maybe that's what's going to make it blow up. Yeah. I'm riding around the ride, you know, maybe 1,000 people watch. How many people need to watch it for me to be happy? Yeah. You know, I don't know. I mean,
a part of that, I think, relates to the specifics of making songs. And then I think a part of what I'm talking about is, that is a part of it, but it's also finding the things that really make you happy. I think some people stay in music and they're not happy doing it. Yeah. You know, they're like, I'm on this ride that I kind of want to get off of too. You know what I mean? And
so how do you stay happy in it?
I mean,
it just makes you happy.
I just love what I'm doing. Yeah. I love the progress that I continue to make. You know, I love the people I get to spend time with in the process of making music with them. Like, I'm not making music with hundreds and hundreds of people all the time, the way I used to when I was like doing more for hire things. People call me up. I mean, my calendar is pretty full. I'm not just available all the time when anyone's like, hey, I want to come in. It's like, I'm sorry, I can probably do something in February, you know, whatever. I have, you know, a lot of focus on what I'm doing, you know, and sometimes that's hard to do because we're so aware of the opportunity cost. You know, what is the cost of saying no to things, you know? But for me, it's really now changed into what is the cost of not saying no to things? Because I think you can be, my friend Paul, incredible producer and amazing drummer, always says you can be too busy to make money. You know, you can just be so busy chasing everything and doing everything. Like, it takes real focus to become who you're meant to become as a human being, as a person, you know? And I think that's also true as a creative. Like, it takes focus and diligence and attention and care to really curate your skill set so that you are the guy for what you are the guy for. Like, no one's calling me up to make Juice WRLD songs. You know, I love Juice WRLD, don't get me wrong, but I am not those producers. You know, I'm a different thing that they might not get the call for, although some of those guys are so good they could probably make anything and be great. But like, you know, saying no to things was something that I really struggled to learn how to do as a people pleaser. If we're talking about like some practical things to help facilitate living in that space of happiness, because I'm just not working on things I don't like. By and large, I just love what comes out the speakers now that I know enough about what I like and how to do that. And so when I'm working with people, it's because we're on the same wavelength. We're trying to make something that they know what I do. They come to me because of music that they've heard. If someone heard Nightbirde and said, hey, I want to make some synth pop, I love making synth pop and interpreting that so it doesn't all sound like exactly the same iteration of synth pop. But I love making that stuff. I love making cinematic stuff. I love making emotive folk music. I love making all kinds of different things. And I want to figure out how to do that more and more with people who love exploring that. So you're automatically like, we're all having such a good time because we're all shooting for that thing. And you're not like, oh, I don't know about that chord. Or, you know, the worst thing, and any producer and songwriters experience this, and we all hate it, I'm sure. You got a group of people writing a song and you're like 2 chords in and someone's like, I don't know about that second chord. It's like, oh, for God's sake, we haven't even started, and just let something settle, you know, when you're an hour into a song and it's like, oh, I don't know about that kick drum sound. It's like, oh, for God's sake, can we just start? You know what I mean? It's the most horrible fear. You're just instantly like, oh God, I'm going to hate today. You know what I mean? So wavelength is such an important part of what makes you happy. Don't try and make everyone happy. You can't. You know what I mean? It took me forever to learn this. I'm a people pleaser from day one. I love the feeling of other people's happiness, whether that's caused by me or not. But how that manifests into adult life is you're always trying to make other people happy. And that's impossible. So if you are on the wavelength, if you just work with people who are on the right wavelength with, that's going to make your career way more satisfying, probably way more successful, probably way happier, because there becomes this upward spiral of ideas and excitement and energy and vibe.
Yes.
And, you know, you always hear people say, oh, I'm an energy person. You know what I mean? Well, every time someone says that around me, they're the ones that mess up the vibe, because they're always like, I'm the energy person, I'm this and that. It's like, everyone's an energy person. You don't have to tell me, because everyone's feeling it. You know what I mean? So just good energy is just so infectious and fun, and just a beautiful thing to be part of music that comes out of that. So yeah, how do you stay happy? Surround yourself with people who, they don't even have to see the world the way you do. Like my girlfriend Anna, incredible person. We have very different political views from our backgrounds being quite different and all that. And at the beginning of our relationship, we're like, I don't know if this is going to be fun for either of us, you know. But I learned so much because I really value her perspective. She's super intelligent. We don't have to agree on it all. I just find it really interesting hearing someone else's perspective from that, who I really respect. And I don't think, oh, she's on down some rabbit hole. It's like, no, she has a whole different life experience that she's bringing into this conversation. And I've learned so much, become more humble by being willing to listen to the things she knows. And she would probably say the same thing. And we still don't agree on everything, but it doesn't have to be a source of conflict either. So same in making music. You don't always have to agree with everyone, but I think there's a sense of happiness of being open to other ideas, but generally being like, we all want the same overarching thing. We want to make something that just feels incredible coming out of the speakers, you know?
Yeah.
I want to I want to be in a space where it's safe to pour myself into those relationships, into that art, into that vibe. And even if you walk out there and it's like, oh, that song was shit, maybe we wouldn't collaborate again. We were just pulling it in different directions. But I definitely want to go and have a beer with that guy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know, letting go of things a little bit and just being like, I just want to be humble and find peace and just share love and just bring my best self. Like, I come alive when I bring my best self and can kind of learn and grow. And so it's kind of humility and gratitude just, I think, has to become really central to your life, you know? I mean, it sounds weird to say that, right? It seems so obvious, but the practical reality that emerges from that is really tangible.
Isn't it all obvious? It's all the most important things. They're so simple, but they're just hard. They're simple, but they're hard. And the hard part of gratitude and humility isn't in the beginning, it's later on.
Right.
Because life throws shit at you.
Of course.
And just tries to derail you. You know what I mean? Or maybe it's not trying to derail you. I don't mean to say that life is against you.
Sure.
But things happen. And how we interpret those things and what we do with them ends up profoundly shaping our lives. And it's hard to stay humble and gracious and loving and inspired when life throws up on you.
Oh, yeah. And listen, we've all been through hard stuff, you know, like, and I don't say that condescendingly. It's like life is real hard sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and we were talking before we started recording the podcast about how fun momentum feels. But if you roll a stone along the ground, it's going to slow down and stop, friction, inertia, like, you know, so that life isn't fighting against you, but there are principles at work that passivity will not overcome those. You have to be dynamic. You have to bring kinetic energy. Potential energy is meaningless until you apply some kinetic energy to it. And I think that applies, you know, like we have to continue to we have to continue to dream and hope and lean in and push forward in all of these things and everything we've touched on. Jane was like that. She had a 2% chance of survival when she was on that show. And she was pushing forward, writing songs, believing and hoping that she had something to say to the world and was not dissuaded by this horrific news. You've lost your beautiful mum and are trying to sort of lean into the messages and inspiration of things that you discovered and found through that journey and are growing and healing and bringing love despite some people respond to that with such pain and bitterness, and it's so understandable. They shut themselves away and they grieve and they live in that anguish. And it's so relatable and understandable, but what you've chosen to do is to share and invite conversation and share that. And that's just such a beautiful response, you know?
The week Anna contacted me back and said, yeah, we'd love to have Geoff on your podcast. I think it was 6 days after my mom died.
Man.
And that email sat in my inbox. I saw it, but obviously I was dealing with other things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it sat, and in the back of my head, growing over time, has been this, am I going to do that? Am I going to do a podcast? Am I going to interview this guy, Geoff? May, June, July, August, 4 months later, I was sitting in here last week. We were doing a podcast, and this guy came in. He was just an inspiring person, and he talked about how he launched his podcast and just kind of how he carried himself and how he spoke. I was, you know, like, I need to fucking get up and do something now. Like, in honestly, taking my trip to the UK, seeing Oasis, all those things were a part of that for me.
Sure.
But it was just this last week, I'm like, okay, it's time to do this. I'm hitting Geoff back, and here we are.
Yeah. I'm so happy you did.
Dude, it's been a great conversation. You're a very inspiring person. And
thank you, man. You too.
Yeah. And your work touched me before I even knew that you existed. It made me cry in my car. So you're doing something right.
That means so much to me. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on, man. And good luck editing this.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. I'll just make it that fade over some